Voices. I'm Doug Cunningham. Hundreds of protesters picketed West Coast ports from Oakland to Los Angeles over the weekend, preventing the offloading of cargo from an Israeli Zim shipping line vessel for 24 hours. It was a protest against Israeli military attacks on civilians in Gaza that so far have killed nearly 2,000, injured many thousands more, and devastated billions of dollars of homes and infrastructure. The International Longshore and Warehouse Union did not officially endorse the protest, but ILWU workers in Oakland refused to cross the picket lines and canceled shifts, citing safety concerns. Steve Zeltzer is a rank-and-file CWA media worker and host of Workweek Radio on KPFA.
The rank and file have a history of not crossing picket lines and supporting international solidarity actions. There was a protest in Long Beach. There was a protest in New York. There was also a protest at the Zim offices in Tokyo. So this is part of an international action to call for a labor blockade of Israel by labor worldwide.
UAW Local 2865, representing academic student workers at the University of California, did support the effort to close the ports to the Israeli ship. This unidentified protester in Oakland urged union members nationwide to take a stand on the killing of civilians in Gaza.
Our goal is to block the offloading of that ship for 24 hours and to send messages to union members all over the country and all over the world to take a stand against these policies that are illegal, inhumane, and immoral.
The International Transport Workers Federation's 43rd Global Conference wrapped up over the weekend in Sofia, Bulgaria. The ITF consists of 360 unions from 116 countries. It has 4.5 million members. Tim Beattie is Director of Global Strategies for the Teamsters Union in the United States. From the ITF conference, Beattie spoke with Canada's Radio Labour about global efforts to organize workers at delivery companies like DHL, FedEx, and UPS.
For DHL workers around the world to be able to organize has been extremely important for us. We assisted TUMTIS in Turkey in their first organizing drive with UPS. That's a well-organized company in the United States. And we encouraged them to organize at DHL and provided solidarity when they were organizing in the form of training and also pressure on the company. But we said that they weren't going to be able to maintain a good contract with UPS if they didn't organize the competitors. And so TUMTIS smartly began to organize in the rest of the sector, including with DHL. We're very pleased with the result and encourage workers worldwide at UPS, at FedEx, and at DHL to organize, because if we can organize throughout the parcel system, we'll create a high standard for all the workers in the industry.
You've been listening to WIN, Workers Independent News. For more information, visit laborradio.org.
It's time for the Rick Smith Show.
I want you to get up now. I want all of you to get up out of your chairs. I want you to get up right now and go to the window, open it, and stick your head out and yell, "I'm as mad as hell, and I'm not going to take this anymore!"
I don't want to abolish government. I simply want to reduce it to the size where I could drag it into the bathroom and drown in the bathtub.
You bet I cut the taxes at the top.
How dare you? How dare you? Go ahead. Make my day.
The Rick Smith Show starts now.
This town gonna be here long after I'm gone. East side, west side, people don't surrender. They've been down, but they still rock on.
And welcome, brothers, sisters, working class heroes. This is the Rick Smith Show. Thanks for being here today on the big program. Lots of stuff going on around the world. Most of my world's been focused over the weekend, focused on what's going on in Missouri. And as I've been following the news, this is the kind of stuff that we've talked about for years. This ramp up of the military-industrial complex right here in the U.S. and this militarization of our police force. and really our communities. And the more you're looking at what's going on in Missouri, the more you look at what's going on in Ferguson, the more you go, is this our future? Is this, and right now it's just happening to black faces and the white faces who have chosen to go there. But the question becomes, when does it happen to the rest of us, or does it? That's the thing, and I'm fighting with both positions. I have lived in a high poverty area. I have lived in growing up as a kid in an area where police came, and when they came in overwhelming force, much like what we're seeing here. I've also lived in neighborhoods where one cop can stop somebody at 2 o'clock in the morning and there be no one ending up dead on the side of the road. Interesting, different dynamics. And while I understand, and I guess that's my problem, I understand both sides of it, because I've had some of my my really far left friends say, we should be giving those cops squirt guns, not real guns, because take their toys away. And I understand that position, but I also understand the other side of it. Of, these are cops who are put in a position that, I don't know that I would want. And I go back to, I had the chance to become a policeman when I grew up in Cleveland, and I passed. My uncle was a lieutenant in in the 2nd district there, and could have easily, curried the path towards me getting on the force, and I just said, I don't think so. Who would want that job for the money that they get paid? And especially in some of the people that I talk to in this town of Ferguson, evidently they don't get all that well paid either. So I do understand both sides of it, and I'd be interested to hear other people's opinions. 1-888-520-RICK, 1-888-520-7425. You can also email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com, because this is something that, while this may at some point in the future go away, when does the next one and the next one? It reminded me, because I had these conversations over the weekend, that I remember when I was a kid, there was a guy down the street from us, and this is one of those, those personal moment stories where it happened to me, where, the kid down the street was accused of rape, and don't know whether he did or if he didn't, but I know there were like 30 cops that showed up. The SWAT van, it was like an episode of SWAT on TV. The big UPS kind of truck, the big box truck with like cops running with the military type weapons out and surrounding the entire area, not just the one house, but all of the area around it. And I remember that the people scared to death just so they could get this one guy. And you go, well, how does it get to that? Now remember, this is back in the 70s. This happened. So this idea that police use overwhelming force now, I think is a little bit sensationalized, because they've always done it, understanding that from their point of view. Because as I was telling this story, that this guy was, he was a hoodlum. He was a white kid. He was a hoodlum. We lived in a predominantly black neighborhood, but one of the only other white kids turned out to be, and I honestly don't remember whether he was found guilty or not. I just know that they disappeared. But he was arrested on the charge of rape, and the rest of the community was outraged against him, and the police actually came in and to protect him and themselves, because as I remember, the people in the community were going after the cops to get through to the, which leads me to that position on the other side of it. Would you want to put yourself in that position where you're the, because I've been watching my Twitter feed and the comments that I've been reading online just scare me, because there seemed to be this element that's trying to stoke this fire that it ends up becoming much more, even more than it is now. Which was the cop, and from what we know, is the cop wrong? Was the cop wrong? From what I know right now, from what's been given to us at this very moment, I think so. Now that's my opinion. We'll see when the rest of the evidence and the rest of the stuff comes out. But at this point, right now, with what's in front of us, do I think the cop way overreacted? Absolutely, without question. Do I know everything that went on? No. And that's the caveat that we're not hearing from the experts in the 140 character crowd, which is, but there's the other part of this. And I brought this up with a friend of mine who very conservative and very pro the cop. In fact, a supporter. Where was this kind of response? Where were the flash grenades? Where were the tear gas canisters? Where were the tanks and all of the stuff when Cliven Bundy and his ilk were pointing weapons at the people, at the officers there? Where was that? And we're coming into this weird world because, one of the first thoughts I had is, I wonder what this situation would have looked like if the people in this fairly high poverty area or changing area, as I understand, it's changing to a high poverty area. What if all these people were Cliven Bundy nuts? What if they were the open carry people? What would the dynamic look like there? What about this kid? What if he would have had a gun? Would it have been more justified? But it was tucked in his waistband. And this is the kind of stuff that over the weekend I was thinking about as we're moving toward this militarized society, not just with the police department, but with everyone. And I'm curious what people's thoughts are, because I'm struggling on all sides of this. I haven't taken an absolute position other than from what I know, from what we've seen in the newspaper, from what we've seen in the reporting, that the cop was way out of bounds. That from what we see, I can't even come to the words that are enough, other than completely unjustified. Now, that doesn't mean that there may be something that pops up down the road. I don't know. But at this moment, right now, with what little we do know, and they just released information now that says that this kid was shot 6 times, which really overkill, if you will. 4 of them were non-threatening. 2 of them were fatal. Well, one of them was fatal. The other one would have been fatal as well, I would assume. But I look at this and I go, there's an awful lot here. And I'm curious what folks' thoughts are. And you can email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com, if you've got thoughts. Because, one person that said to me that, well, we shouldn't give them actual guns. We should give them water guns. And I go, well, that's a nice soundbite. But what do you do when that cop is in a dangerous situation? And there are a number of these conversations that I had that I think we're going to want to get into today. This seems like the story dominated most of what I saw. So I'm interested in your thoughts, comments, questions. 1-888-520-RICK, 1-888-520-7425. Going to take a quick break. When we come back, we'll talk with Igor Volsky, editor over at thinkprogress.org. Stick around. You listen to The Rick Smith Show. We're working people. Come to talk.
Yes, it is all about the children, even after they're born. Rick Smith.
The World in 2. I'm your host, Luke Vargas, reporting for Talk Radio News Service at the United Nations. 1 week ago, the U.S. entered the global spotlight after an unarmed black man was killed by police in the town of Ferguson, Missouri, prompting protests and a massive response by heavily armed cops. Talk Radio News Service correspondent Justin Duckham is on the ground in Ferguson.
Last night, the community underwent yet another night of looting. Today, we're seeing a much more organized scene. You see a lot of outside groups gathering here now. One of the folks who runs a local electronic shop said that probably about a dozen people there who brought balloons and plastic bags to help clean up the mess.
Civic order may be returning to Ferguson, but images from last week presented a startling picture of the U.S. to a global audience, in which a decade-long push to respond to national security threats has left local police forces looking an awful lot like militaries.
That's been questioned as creating incentives for local and state police to use that equipment even if it's not necessary. And that's really problematic under international human rights standards.
Maria McFarland Sanchez Moreno is the Deputy U.S. Program Director for Human Rights Watch.
Police forces are only supposed to use force when it's absolutely necessary and only to the degree necessary to control unlawful protests. But it's not something you should just resort to as a matter of course, which seems to be what's happening here.
Sanchez Moreno says the strong-armed approach to fighting drugs and crime is backfiring.
You know, you fill these prisons with low-level offenders. You give police departments a lot of big toys to play with, and you end up with what looks like more lawlessness instead of actually addressing real problems.
For more global news headlines, visit talkradionews.com.
This is the Media Matters Minute. I'm John Kerr. President Obama called for healing and police restraint amid protests following the death of a teenager killed by a police officer in Ferguson, Missouri.
There is never an excuse for violence against police or for those who would use this tragedy as a cover for vandalism or looting.
But on Fox News' The O'Reilly Factor, guest host Laura Ingraham baselessly accused Obama of inflaming racial tensions by speaking out on the issue.
The leader of the free world, with sagging approval numbers, jumping into another local criminal justice situation. These Obama administration interjections have stoked racial discord in America and sown more distrust between minorities and some local law enforcement.
And on Fox News' The Five, co-host Andrea Tantaros also ignored Obama's call for peace, instead suggesting that,
to me, the president only inflamed a situation. He should have said, the reason we can't have this investigation is because we've been too focused on the rioting, stop the rioting, and called for peace.
For more on this and other stories, visit MediaMatters.org.
Chances are, when you took a shower this morning, an AFSCME member made sure that water was clean. When you drove to work, an AFSCME member maintained the road. When you rode an elevator, an AFSCME member inspected it. I'm David Philman, Executive Director of AFSCME Council 13, the American Federation of State, County, and Municipal Employees. AFSCME members enforce regulations, keep prisoners behind bars, take care of patients, protect the environment, and more. The work isn't glamorous. The salaries aren't high, but AFSCME members serve the public in every aspect of our daily lives. Chances are, you'll never see that AFSCME member working in a sewage plant, diving underwater to repair a bridge, or answering a 911 call. But aren't you glad they do? For more information, visit AFSCME13.org. We are AFSCME.
Time for change. Time to rearrange.
Keeping the chambers of commerce within their gated communities. The Rick Smith Show.
You can't tell me we're gonna make it somehow. I heard a white man say the revolution starts now. I think it's time for change.
Breaking news in my community. And you got to wonder, I often wonder if where I live, and it's something that's going to make me question my own police department. Do we have armored tanks? Do we, here in where I live in the small town of Carlisle, just outside of Harrisburg, do we have tanks? Do we have flash grenades? Do we have tear gas canisters? Do we have all this stuff? Because the breaking news today out of the Patriot News, the area's large newspaper, is the police here in our little town looking for a couple. I can't even believe this is news, but I have to on a sarcastic level. The police are looking for a couple who stole organic face wash. This actually made the newspaper. Organic face wash. Evidently, they left the store. They came back and tried to exchange it for a gift card. This happened on Friday. Why this is news today, I don't know. But they're looking for a gray or silver Ford Explorer. So if you've seen them, turn them in and, well, Right, you got to wonder. You got to wonder if a shooting would ensue there. Anyway, this whole thing in Ferguson has just really consumed my little pocket of the world. And last week, while in Philadelphia, most of the people that I had a chance to talk to, here to talk a little bit more about it, I've asked Igor Volsky. He is the editor over at Think Progress to come talk with us. Igor, thanks for taking time for us.
Hey, Rick. Good to be with you.
So I look in my little town there. The big newspaper in the area says, you know what? We got to go after and find these people who stole this organic face wash. I got to wonder if it were cigars. I wonder what would happen.
Yeah, my goodness, they must have clean faces applying for that gift certificate there. But it is a story that's not only rocking your part of the world, but has really raised so many issues across the country in terms of what it means yet again to be young and black in this country. How you're treated is so different than so many white people. I mean, you've heard time and time again this refrain on Twitter and elsewhere that for the white people are just shocked that this is happening in Ferguson and that a man can be killed in this way. And many black people in this country aren't at all because to them this is a part of America that they know not to drive when it's too late or too early. In fact, there have been stories coming out of Ferguson that a lot of people in the African American community avoid driving at specific points during the day or avoid certain routes and towns because of the fear that they could be pulled over. So all of that now is kind of coming to the surface yet again, and I think is a conversation, as we see from all the reactions, is long overdue.
Yeah, we talked about that last week, where the police department is equipped with these license plate readers that read the technology is just amazing that they have, that can read every license plate that goes by and almost instantly run a background check to tell you if the plates are outdated or if they're wanted for a warrant or anything, which gives them that ability to basically pull over anybody who's a day behind on their tags.
Yeah, and what's I think stunning specifically to this story is not only these capabilities that the police have. We saw the way they've tried to control the crowds of protesters with tools that are straight out of Iraq and Afghanistan. In fact, the surplus that came out of those two wars has been distributed to local police departments across the country. And you're right. I think a lot of Americans are asking if something like this happens in our community, or if we feel the need to protest a certain action by police, will we too be tear gassed? Will we have assault rifles pointed in our faces? I mean, it's really quite startling and shocking.
I've been saying for a long time, all the crowd control tactics that we learned in Iraq, and all the toys and all, the goodbye gun and the sound cannons and all of this stuff that we did overseas, that got to come somewhere. And a lot of that stuff came back here. We saw it in Oakland. We saw it in Pittsburgh. We've seen it in a number of places. And I got a question. How much of this comes out of that mentality that we're at war, and coming from the days of Homeland Security forward? I wonder how much of that is part of this.
Well, certainly that's part of the justification, this idea that we need all of these weapons in case there's some kind of terrorist incident, that you want your police department to be properly equipped. And that has some truth to it. Of course, the problem, though, and this is what we've seen in Ferguson, is when these weapons of war are used on innocent protesters and there's no leadership from up top, it seems like, or these conflicting chains of command where officers and captains don't really even know what's going on, right. That's where you run into problems and abuse.
Because you said a minute ago that white America is shocked. Do you think that really we were shocked that a black teenager got shot down in the middle of the street? I found no one who was surprised at that. I do find a lot of people surprised at the police response, this overwhelming tactical force that I don't think we've seen before.
Certainly we haven't seen in a very long time. And you remember during, I think, the lead up to the Iraq protests in 2002, 2003, we saw kind of similar police abuse in those anti-war protests. I don't think they were at the scale, or certainly not at the level of media attention that this killing has received. But I do think, Rick, just the idea that this guy was unarmed, was shot at least 5 times, we now know. The efforts of the police department in the aftermath to try to stain his character by releasing the video of him robbing a convenience store allegedly. Now there's this new rumor online that he had marijuana in his system, according to anonymous tipsters telling the Washington Post. There really appears to be this strategy to try to, tear this kid down and somehow justify the action by Darren Wilson. I'm sorry.
Yeah, no, the whole pot thing doesn't fly with me. Most of the people, I've never done it, so I don't know. But most of the people who I know who have used marijuana, they're not the aggressive types.
No, and according to friends of Wilson, he believed, allegedly, this is what he told them in the kind of the day after the attack, that he believed that Brown was, quote, on something, that he was coming at him very quickly, and this is why he felt compelled to shoot him. But it's hard to believe that if he were on anything, on any substance that would make him act in this manner, it's hard to believe that substance would be marijuana.
Now, look, as I said at the beginning, I don't know absolutely everything that went on. I know only what little bits have been put out. And this video, had they come out with this earlier, but maybe this would have changed things. I don't know. But as I understand, with the video, and maybe you've got a better sense of this, it wasn't released until late Friday. They didn't even have access to it. Can you go into a little bit around this video?
Well, and they released the video over the objection of the federal government, over the objection of the family who asked for the video not to be released because it was so prejudicial, and it was very unclear that it was in any way connected to the actual shooting. And since then, you had the police captain admit that at the time of the shooting, the officer did not know that these 2 men, Brown and his friend, that they were suspects in this robbery. So it's unclear what exactly the purpose of releasing the video was at all. Yeah. And just one thing, this idea of let's wait until all the facts come forward is what you kind of hear a lot, particularly from some of the more conservative voices in the media. But I think, it's as if there's going to be this perfectly clean and unbiased investigation that is going to spread out the truth and nothing but the truth about what exactly happened. I don't think that's really how the real world works. And in this situation, where so much has already been contaminated and manipulated, it's even harder to believe. And even though there's kind of 3 layers of investigation going on now, it's hard to believe that there's going to be any chain of events that's going to come forward that's going to satisfy everyone, given the way this entire situation has been playing out.
Well, what do you say to those? Because most of the people I know, most of my friends, all they see is what's on the evening news, what's on TV, and all they see is chaos. They see an area that's burning. This isn't the entire St. Louis area. This is a very small, just a small section of it. But all they see is this chaos. And people want something done about to stop the violence. What? I guess I'm seeing this, and this is all they're seeing is this violence.
Well, yeah, those are the most compelling images, certainly. I think what it's going to take to get that off the TV screens is some actual progress in the case. So we might see an indictment, if one is forthcoming, take place as early as Wednesday against the officer. He's currently in some secure location somewhere. But that's going to be really the next step, is what kind of legal process will he go through? Will he be charged? What will he be charged with? And then, of course, the trial. But I think certainly now the anger is the police coming at the protesters and the protesters demanding justice. and people just kind of waiting to see how long it's going to take for this guy to be charged.
Yeah, there is that. But the other part of this is it's the destruction that people are seeing. My wife said to me, they're burning down probably one of the only places where they have to buy stuff, and it's one of the things that grabbed me. This Quick Check or Quick Mart or Quickie, whatever it is, they burned this down, and it's one of only a handful of places in that community to buy stuff. And you look at the video, the guy who. He didn't call the police, nor did anybody he worked for, because he's got to live in that community, which I fully understand. But it's
you gotta ask what has been going on in this community. We know about the disparity between the police force and the population.
Right.
That you have white people in power of a majority African American community. What has been going on over these years for this situation just to boil over the way it did, for people to take to the streets in this way? I mean, there's, I think, a deeper, broader story in all of this. Certainly, the catalyst was the killing of Michael Brown, but this pent-up frustration that I think has been brewing under the surface for many years is suddenly really boiling over.
One of the folks I had the opportunity, who lives right in that area, I had the opportunity to talk to last week, because I asked that very question. How is it that you have a community overwhelmingly black community when you have a police department of, I think it was 53 policemen and 50 of them were white, or something along those lines? And he said, you've got to understand the neighborhood. And the neighborhood has undergone a significant change in the last 10 years. In fact, it happened so fast that there's no way that the police department could have changed over with it without wholesale firing of the police who were there. So I kind of understand the changing of demographics and the power structure not changing with it, but I still do have some major questions.
Yeah, no, and I think they're all really valid questions. I think what's really also not helping is, and we touched on this already, is how officials have really, screwed up this entire process from the very beginning. The fact that we don't really even know the facts as they played out on that Sunday. We know or Saturday. We don't know what exactly happened. They waited so long to release the name of the officer. They haven't provided really any understanding, at least not before last night, about how many times he was shot, what exactly happened. And so all that just breeds mistrust on top of all the resentment that already exists.
So let me then ask the other side of this question, because you look at this small town of just 53 police officers. They're not equipped really for this kind of a thing. So could you make an argument, and I'm just throwing this out as a possibility, that they weren't equipped to have this kind of chain of command and this hierarchy of something this large?
Yeah, it certainly seems that way, and it's surprising that it took Governor Nixon all this time to finally call in the National Guard, which appears to have kind of a better skill set to handle large crowds and large protests, and maybe wouldn't have overreacted in this way that only, propelled further violence and escalated the situation. I think the fact that it's taken this long for people like Ron Johnson, who's the head of the Highway Patrol, to take responsibility for controlling the crowds, the fact that it's taken this long to bring in the National Guard, I think again speaks to the slow response rate. And yes, I think that if those folks were in charge from the very beginning, then maybe perhaps you would have seen a better response, and you wouldn't have had the kind of violent clashes that we saw last night and throughout much of the last week.
How much of the violence do you think are agent provocateurs, or people just looking to stir up trouble, or this is just actually people who are truly frustrated in the community, or don't we really have a sense of that yet?
Well, it's some combination. Certainly you have people who are burning down the stores, who are looting the stores, who are using this as an opportunity to create greater mayhem and unrest. But then you also have the very kind of heartfelt stories of protesters kind of barricading places of business to make sure they're protected and they're not looted, and saying, look, we don't endorse that kind of violence. It really takes away from the message we're trying to send about seeking justice for Michael Brown and for his family. But there are certainly those elements who are trying to take advantage of the chaos to commit criminal acts, sadly.
And what do you think? What are we expecting in the coming days? Is there any, now that the National Guard's in place? What are you seeing? What do you think is going to be the next couple of days?
Well, I think hopefully yesterday was really the last day that we saw the kind of violence that's been plaguing the situation with military-style weapons and tear gas and all that kind of behavior. The trouble is that as more information leaks out, will, for instance, the report that came out early this morning or late last night about Michael Brown being shot at least 5 times, 2 of those to the head, will that kind of inspire and motivate more violence? I certainly hope not, but I think that slow drip, 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 really devastating news about how this entire situation went down. Hopefully that won't serve as a catalyst for greater aggression, particularly now that you have, I think, the right leaders in place. And of course, on the legal front, maybe we'll see an indictment in the coming days. And so then this entire process will move from the streets to the courtroom, where you'll have, less violence and kind of more of a traditionally orderly case that's going to make its way through the system. But of course, if this guy isn't charged at a high enough level, if he's acquitted ultimately, you can, my goodness, I think foresee a great national reaction.
Yeah, I'm with you. There's got to be something, and do you see any way that this guy walks away from this?
Oh, it's hard to see that it's hard to see that he's at least not charged.
Right. We shall see what the coming days bring us. Igor, it's always great talking with you. I appreciate you taking time for us.
Always a pleasure.
Thanks so much. Igor Volsky, managing editor over at thinkprogress.org. Quick break, right back. Stick around. You're listening to The Rick Smith Show.
When the kids are united, they can never be divided. As yesterday, there's a brand new chef today.
Uncovering the con in conservatism. Rick Smith.
Another day of sudden flood emergencies and high water rescues, this time in Long Island, New York.
Historic storms and flooding paralyze cities across the U.S. California breaks heat records again. China breaks solar investment records. Plus,
there's some nutcases in our country that don't believe in global warming.
President Jimmy Carter criticizes climate-denying Republicans.
All of those nutcases and more straight ahead. From BradBlog.com, I'm Brad Friedman.
And I'm Desi Doyen.
Stand by for 6 minutes of independent green news, politics, analysis, and snarky comment.
This episode uses strong, potentially offensive language to refer to climate deniers, but it's probably still not strong or offensive enough.
Ooh, Jay of the Best of the Left podcast getting into our snarky comment game. Well snarked, Jay. This is your Green News Report. Okay, Desi Doyen, we talked about it in our report earlier this week, but the rains had not finished yet in Detroit and had not even gotten to Long Island by that time.
Oh, yeah, the extreme weather hits just keep on coming. Historic deluges and dangerous flash floods breaking records across the eastern half of the U.S. this week, demonstrating the multiple, serious, and expensive impacts of global warming that are increasingly overwhelming our aging infrastructure. In Detroit,
the ground came up, and I just remember screaming at him, saying that we gotta go. It's not safe.
A record deluge caused historic flooding in the Motor City on Monday that turned highways into rivers, killing 2 people, and also backed up the city's sewage system into the streets. Days later, divers are still searching for victims in completely submerged cars. In Nebraska, a hospital security camera caught the power and speed of a massive flash flood that burst through the doors of the hospital with the speed and force of a tsunami. Several cities from Arizona to Massachusetts saw record flooding, but none so much as the Long Island town of Islip in New York State, which recorded 13 inches of rain in just 3 hours, unprecedented in state history.
When was the last time you've seen it this bad?
I actually worked during Hurricane Sandy, and it's been that kind of day.
Islip broke the New York State record for heaviest rainfall in a one-day period that was set during Hurricane Irene. But this was not a hurricane.
No, this was just Wednesday.
Right. Now, why is this happening all at once?
Why is this happening all at once?
Funny you should ask. NBC News reports it's changes in the jet stream.
According to a recent study, extreme weather is due to a rise in blocking patterns. That's when hot or wet weather stays stuck over a region for an extended period of time.
Most scientists are not surprised. They've actually seen this coming for a while. We've seen these type of blocking weather patterns almost double in the last decade.
We've seen it coming for a while. We've talked about it on this show for a while. Scientists have been warning about it for a very long time, all during which the denialists out there have just been ignoring it as if there's nothing to see here, no concerns.
Right, and of course good for NBC for mentioning that increase in blocking patterns, making extreme weather events more common.
So a blocking pattern is basically what?
Melting sea ice in the Arctic is changing the atmospheric air temperature. That's changing the jet stream, slowing it down, and that's what causes these blocking patterns.
So the systems stall, they can't move across the country as they normally would. Instead, they get blocked in place and just drop all of this water in one place?
Yep, but what NBC didn't tell you was the rest of the story. That new study also concluded that human-caused global warming is driving that increase in blocking patterns and extreme weather events. It's the opposite effect in California, where extended record drought is sending shockwaves through the global food market, raising food prices. And not helping, California is also crushing heat records. The first 7 months of this year were the hottest ever recorded in the Golden State, meaning that 2014 is likely to beat 2013 as California's hottest year on record.
So the fact that I have been whining about how warm it is out here in California over the past 7 or 8 months is not my imagination.
That's right. Now, the solution to this, says former President Jimmy Carter,
is denying it?
No, it's to cut emissions.
We need something like a carbon tax, which I think is the only reasonable approach.
In an appearance at a renewable energy conference in Aspen, Colorado, the 89-year-old conservationist who established the Department of Energy and warned of the need to act on global warming while in office way back in the 1970s, he laid the blame for inaction squarely on Republican climate deniers.
I would say the biggest handicap we have right now is some nutcases in our country that don't believe in global warming.
But finally, some good news in China. They're already taking action. The city of Beijing just announced it is banning coal in its districts by 2020. And a new report shows China has installed more solar power in just the last 6 months than the U.S. currently has in existence.
Impossible. Fox News has told me over and over again that we can do whatever we want about global warming, but China doesn't care, and they're going to keep emitting. I guess Fox News was wrong again.
Yep.
Go figure. For much more on those stories and the ones we couldn't get to, please check out our website at greennews.bradblog.com. While you're there, please consider a donation to help the Green News Report stay on your public airwaves. From bradblog.com, I'm Brad Friedman.
And I'm Desi Doyen.
And this has been your Green News Report.
Don't you know, we're talking about a revolution sounds. Don't you know?
Together, we can make America better. The Rick Smith Show. Progressive talk with a conscience.
While they're standing in the welfare lines, crying at the doorsteps of those armies of salvation, wasting time in the unemployment lines, sitting around waiting for a promotion.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show.
Talking about a river.
Check out the website, thericksmithshow.com. Questions, comments, something on your mind, email me, rick at thericksmithshow.com. Got an email during the break questioning my position. And like I said, look, my problem is I understand both sides of this. I understand all of it. I understand being in both situations. I've had moments where dealing with policemen have been less than professional. I have seen horrible situations where people, both black and white, have been treated in horrible ways. But I've also seen, situations like what's going on in Ferguson, where you've got the cops who are standing there being poked like stuck, being poked at, wanting a reaction by provocateurs. So I do understand it. And over the weekend, I started thinking about a friend of mine. Back to high school, a guy who I played baseball and played basketball with. And he was probably one of the nicest guys I ever in high school, one of the nicest guys I ever met. Probably one of both him and his brother, to be honest. They were both very passive, but nice guys, but you couldn't get into a fight with them if your life depended on it. And if you hit them, they wouldn't hit you back. Now, they beat each other up, which is a weird dynamic, but outwardly they just didn't do it. And I started thinking about him. And he became a policeman in the city, and overnight it was almost an overnight transformation. And I'm not defending this cop in any way, shape, or form, which is weird for me because I'm very much not someone who's going to defend cops. But I understand that, and I look at my friend who completely overnight changed. The job changes you completely, and then you put on these military outfits. You start pitting. I can only imagine in this day and age. Now, this was back 20 some years ago, where we didn't have all of the toys and all of the stuff from Homeland Security and war and all of this stuff. I can only imagine now what these cops go through. Now, does it mean that they have to be complete and total you-know-whats? No. But that kind of is the job. But I think about him, and he was like I said, one of the nicest guys I ever knew. And he turned into just a horrible human being, doing some of the worst things that you can imagine. And it's part of the job. And I talked to a guy over the weekend, last week while we were in Philadelphia, who was a policeman, got away from it, had to get away from it. And he said himself, look, I was a horrible guy. I had to get away from it. And once you put on that uniform, it's not about white or black, because one of the guys I was talking to was a black guy. He said I was one of the worst offenders. It's the job. And it's also being put in those positions. And again, I am not in any way justifying what this cop did. But I understand. I understand being put in a situation where you've been told these folks are subhuman. And it's societal. I was thinking, and then you compare that. Why didn't we see the Clive and Bundys, the little foray there go south? Why didn't we see tanks? Why didn't we see any response? Was it because they were white? Was it because they were heavily armed? What was the reason? I would argue a lot of it has to do that they were white, and a lot of it has to do that they had resources. These are not poor people in the Clive and Bundy world. Now, these folks in Ferguson, these are not people of enormous means. And for me, all of it comes back to poverty, because you know what? When I grew up in the housing projects, the cops were no nicer to me than they were to the blackface next to me. So the question then becomes power. Autopsy report, a preliminary report released today, showed that Michael Brown was shot at least 6 times, twice in the head, according to the lawyer representing the family, a guy named Benjamin Crum. He says, quote, "It verifies the worst that the family thinks happened, that he was executed." He says it confirms what the witnesses said, that this was an execution. That's what the witnesses said from day one. He, according to the report, added that Brown had several wounds on his arms and a kill shot to the head. Crum went on to say, it's so hard for his mother and father to even deal with the notion that this is what happened, and it's obvious his hands were up at some point because you can tell how the bullet goes in and out. I can't imagine. As a parent, can't even begin to imagine the pain that this family feels. Let's take a quick break. Right back. Stick around.
7, yeah, and I'll go to work at 9. I got no time for living, yes, I'm working all the time. It seems to me I could live my life a lot better than I think I am. I guess that's why they call me the working man.
Making the blue blood see red. The Rick Smith Show.
Would you dive 14 feet deep in the Susquehanna to keep a bridge safe? Would you spend night after night with prisoners to keep your community safe? Would you spend Christmas Eve plowing snow to keep roads safe? AFSCME members do. Men and women who choose to serve in public service. Mine inspectors, 911 dispatchers, healthcare workers, parole agents. You may not think about them, but no, they're all thinking about you. This message brought to you by AFSCME Council 13.
The story exploding out of Ferguson, Missouri is doubly infuriating. First, there is the obvious outrage of yet another unarmed black teenager, Michael Brown, being stopped by one of the town's white police officers as he was walking to his grandmother's house. The scuffle ensued and Brown was shot to death by the officer. He was then left lying in the street for hours, during which time the police didn't even bother to notify his family. Understandably, furious citizens have erupted in protest. Outrage number 2 is that Ferguson's police, practically all of whom are white in a town that's 2/3 black, did not respond to the public outcry like police officers, but like an occupying army. What was needed was a calm, professional, and empathetic response. Instead, the police confronted Ferguson with full military force, rolling out in armored Bearcat vehicles, hovering helicopters, riot gear, camouflage outfits, and body armor. They approached the unarmed citizens with assault rifles, grenades, tear gas, nightsticks, and a macho attitude. It was a tactical commando assault on civilians, the vast majority of whom were doing what they should be doing, calling autocrats to account. But wait, where did this tiny town's police force, supposedly made up of peace officers, get such weaponry and a military attitude? From the Pentagon, which has quietly been militarizing America's police departments for the last 2 decades, sending billions of dollars worth of Bearcats, helicopters, machine guns, etc. to any Mayberry police chief with Rambo fantasies. This is Jim Hightower saying, your town and mine are being militarized too. We must halt this perversion of proper policing, or we'll be the next Ferguson. For starters, tell your governor, don't militarize my block. You can do it by going to www.change.org/petitions.
Hightower's commentaries are brought to you by the Hightower Lowdown, the monthly newsletter with Hightower's take on what Wall Street and Washington are up to. For information, visit hightowerlowdown.org.
Exposing GOP hypocrisy. The Rick Smith Show.
If you want to, here's to the future. He's a crying, I want it all. I want it all. I want it all. And I want it now.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Interesting gun story. Guy in Kansas was shot in the backside. He was out doing yard work. And that's what you need to. You need to be shot for doing yard work. Evidently a stray bullet fired from about a half a mile away clipped this Kansas guy in the backside. The names of the people who were just out having fun, not released. Police say they have 5 people, ages 18 to 20, who had been target shooting with no backstop on a nearby farm. You know, and that's the thing that gets me. People think, you know, the bullets, they go and they just stop. They go where you want, or they just stop. The guy who got shot in the rear end, he's expected to exist. He'll make it. He'll be fine, but not happy. The sergeant of the police department there said, when you're shooting rifles that are made for long distances, you definitely need to know what's behind your target when you shoot. That might be some good advice, not just for people who are shooting as a sport, but maybe people who are shooting as a policeman. Another good gun story. You know, Georgia just passed the same law that I think Tennessee first passed that allows you to take your gun into the bar with you. You know, you should be able to have it with you, like your date. Have your gun like your date. Evidently, this guy walks out of the bar. And that really kind of starts off as a joke, doesn't it? Guy walks out of a bar. No, he walks out of the bar, and I don't know what he was doing. Maybe he was fiddling for keys. Maybe he was playing pocket pool. Who knows? But he shot himself in the hand. Bullet goes through the hand. Another good story of bullet doesn't stop where it's supposed to in your hand. Goes across street. Kills a woman from Texas as she's walking down the road. The police tried to revive her at the scene, dead at the scene. He evidently will be charged with involuntary manslaughter, and of course he has the hole in the hand. And you kind of got to wonder, because as the report points out, the employees of the bar were issued explicit instruction not to talk about the case. And absolutely not to say if he had been drinking before the shooting. And that's, one of the questions that, I had of the cop. Did they do a drug test of the cop in Ferguson? Since they've drug tested the victim, did they drug test the cop? Was he 3 sheets to the wind? I don't know. Interesting question. But to go back to, because I got another email during the break here, that again, it makes it sound like I'm trying to defend the cop's action. I'm not. I'm simply saying that there's two sides to every story, and that I understand both situations. I've been in both situations. So you can say that I'm either fortunate or misfortunate to have been in both. I'm somebody who got beat up by 9 cops. So I understand excessive use of police force. I got it. Long story, very, very short. Back when I was a young man, decided that I would drink and drive. Bad idea, but young and dumb. Cost me an awful lot. Altercation then ensued. Woman cop hit me in the head with a flashlight, and everything went downhill from there. And before you know it, there are 9 policemen there who are, at one point pummeling me, which some would say you deserved, and in retrospect probably did. But I understand that overwhelming force. And I also understand the need for it on a certain level. Because when you have these kind of crowd situations, all it takes is that spark. So I'm as I said, I am absolutely, positively, without doubt, at this moment, given what's in front of me, that this cop was in the wrong. There's another side to all of the stuff that's gone on after it. And part of it is just really bad communications and really bad people at the top who didn't know how to handle this, who didn't have a clue of what they were actually doing. And that's kind of scary if you think about it. It's kind of scary that the people who are in charge had not a clue of how to operate this. When you send out that kind of overwhelming force in front of people, and you know there's going to be tension there. So we'll see what happens. We'll see what the coming days, weeks, and months brings us on this front. The hope is that we begin to ramp this down a little bit and hold people accountable where they need to be held accountable. Just my thought. Anyway, if you missed any portion of today's program, thericksmithshow.com. That's where you go to get the podcast. Anything last week that we did at the Teamsters Conference, by all means, take a look there at thericksmithshow.com. I'll take a quick break, right back. Stick around. You're listening to The Rick Smith Show. We're working people. Come to talk. If I can find the Well, this is very strange. It seems that everything has completely frozen computer-wise. I've been having those. Have you had those problems where everything just seems to freeze computer-wise? Which I've been doing here lately, that the computer just kind of just locks up on me. There we go. There we go. Right back.
Exposing that free trade is never free. The Rick Smith Show.
You're listening to The Rick Smith Show. For more information, go to thericksmithshow.com. If you've missed any portion of the program, you can download the podcast at thericksmithshow.com.
You're listening to WIN, Workers Independent News, a production of Diversified Media Enterprises. I'm Doug Cunningham. Hundreds of protesters picketed West Coast ports from Oakland to Los Angeles over the weekend, preventing the offloading of cargo from an Israeli Zim shipping line vessel for 24 hours. It was a protest against Israeli military attacks on civilians in Gaza that so far have killed nearly 2,000, injured many thousands more, and devastated billions of dollars of homes and infrastructure. The International Longshore and Warehouse Union did not officially endorse the protest, but ILWU workers in Oakland refused to cross the picket lines and canceled shifts, citing safety concerns. Steve Zeltzer is a rank-and-file CWA media worker and host of Workweek Radio on KPFA.
And the rank and file have a history of not crossing picket lines and supporting international solidarity actions. There was a protest in Long Beach. There was a protest in New York. There was also a protest at the Zim offices in Tokyo. So this is part of an international action to call for a labor blockade of Israel by labor worldwide.
UAW Local 2865, representing academic student workers at the University of California, did support the effort to close the ports to the Israeli ship. This unidentified protester in Oakland urged union members nationwide to take a stand on the killing of civilians in Gaza.
Our goal is to block the offloading of that ship for 24 hours and to send messages to union members all over the country and all over the world to take a stand against these policies that are illegal, inhumane, and immoral.
The International Transport Workers Federation's 43rd Global Conference wrapped up over the weekend in Sofia, Bulgaria. The ITF consists of 360 unions from 116 countries. It has 4.5 million members. Tim Beattie is Director of Global Strategies for the Teamsters Union in the United States. From the ITF conference, Beattie spoke with Canada's Radio Labour about global efforts to organize workers at delivery companies like DHL, FedEx, and UPS.
For DHL workers around the world to be able to organize has been extremely important for us. We assisted Tumtis in Turkey in their first organizing drive with UPS. That's a well-organized company in the United States. And we encouraged them to organize at DHL and provided solidarity when they were organizing in the form of training and also pressure on the company. But we said that they weren't going to be able to maintain a good contract with UPS if they didn't organize the competitors. And so Tumtis smartly began to organize in the rest of the sector, including with DHL. We're very pleased with the result and encourage workers worldwide at UPS, at FedEx, and at DHL to organize, because if we can organize throughout the parcel system, we'll create a high standard for all the workers in the industry.
You've been listening to WIN, Workers Independent News. For more information, visit laborradio.org.
Waving the flag of freedom for people, not corporations. Rick Smith.
Last week, did you miss it? Did you miss it? Last week was Freedom Week. Yes, National Employee Freedom Week, put on by the folks over at the Commonwealth Foundation, you know, the Tea Party think tank, and their ilk across the country. Some 70 groups in, and I guess it was 45 states, who have put together this freedom this freedom to work for crummy wages in bad conditions with none of that wage and hour laws, kind of taking us back, as I've said on this program a number of days, back to the good old days of the Lochner era, taking us back to the good old days of the 80s and 90s and not the 1980s and 90s, which is why I've asked Jane Carter. She is a labor economist with the American Federation of State, County, and Municipal Employees, AFSCME, to come talk with us. Jane, thanks for taking time for us.
Thanks for having me. I'm excited to be here.
So, freedom. What a great idea. Freedom in the workplace.
Yeah, they've really mastered that, the whole messaging aspect of it, the same as right to work in the workplace as well.
I can have freedom and liberty and such wonderful concepts. That's great, isn't it? Shouldn't we be fighting for freedom?
Absolutely, but I think that this is, it's another deceptive tactic by the state policy network affiliates across this country to go after labor unions and working families across the country in every single state just about.
So who are these state policy network people? I know one here in Pennsylvania, the Tea Party think tank, as I like to call them, the Commonwealth Foundation. I believe they're one of them. Who are these people, though?
Yeah, so Commonwealth Foundation is a member, and then there's 63 affiliate members of State Policy Network across this country. And interesting enough, State Policy Network is an organization I don't think a lot of people have heard about. It's kind of this darker aspect to the American Legislative Exchange Council. State Policy Network operates on a budget of approximately $83 million, and they flow that money into their 63 affiliates. Every single state in this country has an affiliate of State Policy Network. Some of them are lucky enough to have two.
Yeah, I was going to ask that, because last I checked, there weren't 63 states.
No, so some states actually have two State Policy Network affiliates, and you take their $83 million budget on a national level, and you compare that to ALEC, which a lot of folks know about ALEC these days. Sure. ALEC only operates on a $7 million budget, and it's funded by the same characters, the Koch brothers, the National Right to Work Committee, the Heritage Institute, and just your typical backers. But interesting enough, State Policy Network actually has additional funders that I think a lot of your listeners may not be aware of, but it's funded by the Searle Foundation, the Scafee Foundation, the Bradley Foundation, the Waltons Foundation. So significant amounts of money coming in to these affiliates to run these kinds of campaigns. And Freedom Week actually started off a few years ago as a proposal by the Nevada Policy Research Institute. And they targeted teachers to try to get them to drop and really push this, and now SPN, State Policy Network, kind of picked up and decided to run with it in as many states as they possibly could.
Yeah, because what we need is we really need to attack those greedy, self-centered teachers. Those human. We need to go after them.
Yeah, our teachers, our nurses, our corrections officers, our firefighters. Yeah, they are. They're the reason this entire country is facing an economic crisis. Let me tell you.
Oh, don't you remember in 2008 when they brought the economy to its knees?
Right. You mentioned at the beginning of this piece, it's about going back in time and going back to kind of the robber barons time. I don't know if your listeners have heard this new report that S&P just put out the beginning of August, and said that actual income gap now today is so extreme that it actually threatens to hamper our long-term economic growth. So when you talk about the economy, kind of going on an uptick, a lot of folks say there's more jobs out there, but it's not the same kind of jobs that are going to actually produce good local economies in our communities, and do not produce the kind of economic gains that we want to see as a country.
And this is why, as I've been saying for years on this program, as someone who grew up in a housing project on the west side of Cleveland, and I now live in a neighborhood with doctors and lawyers, really only one reason for that. And that was I was a Teamster for 22 years, and I had that union card and that contract in my pocket. That's what I'd still be doing the same kind of work, just for a whole lot less money. It's because of that contract. It's because of the union that is under attack by people like this State Policy Network, because this freedom that they're supposedly giving us is the freedom to starve.
Oh, absolutely. And, it's interesting. There's been this attack from the right wing for quite some time. ALEC is actually, they celebrated their 40th anniversary in December. So this is a multi-decade sort of attack coming after labor unions. Right to Work is actually an ALEC model bill, and ALEC is now developing a new organization called ACE, coming after our cities and counties. And so taking ALEC model bills and pushing them in your local communities. But oddly enough, when it comes down to the economics of it, like on average, union members make 27% more than a non-union worker.
Yep.
And on average, union members are 85% more likely to have health insurance versus 54% of their non-union counterparts. And so you see that actually is reflected in your local communities as well. Like you said, you go from living in the projects, you get a good union job, and you actually can contribute on an economic basis to your local community.
No, I bring it back to myself. I mean, I don't need national averages to tell me what's reality, and I think most of our listeners, they don't need it either. Back in the mid-'80s, I was making $15 an hour throwing boxes on a shipping dock. That job today only pays $11 an hour.
Right, probably because it's also been, they broke the union, or if it was a public sector job, they probably outsourced it and privatized it.
Yeah, and that's the thing that gets me is, when are we going to wake up with these privatization schemes and say stop? I know here in Pennsylvania, fortunately, there was enough outcry to stop the privatization of our lottery management and the privatization of our wine and spirit shops. But you still got a governor here who's talking about privatizing the parks and privatizing this and that and everything. And maybe it's just me, but I've yet to find anything that we've privatized that's actually done better for society, cost us less, and been more efficient as we were promised.
Well, that's a whole interesting other argument to this, and the reason that we have State Policy Network affiliates and the Koch brothers and ALEC coming after public employees and public services in this country is because at the end of last year, Wall Street actually valued public sector services and assets to total $6 trillion. That's a huge market for them. So what our AFSCME members, our amazing sisters and brothers at NEA and AFT, and some of the other unions that represent public employees, SEIU, CWA, Teamsters, I think our workers are worth a heck of a lot more than $6 trillion. But that's the price tag that Wall Street put on us, and that's what we're worth. And so that's why these big companies and the Koch brothers are coming after us. They don't just want to break the union, which is the only and the last line of defense to protect the middle class. They want a piece of that $6 trillion.
And I would agree with you. It's got to be more than that. But you go back and you look at, and we were just in Philadelphia all last week, and the privatization of education that's going on in there, where they're destroying public education right before our very eyes and pushing everything towards these charters, either the nonprofit and the for-profit ones, all at the expense of the kids who aren't as fortunate to be able to get into these.
And I can talk economics all day about what our union members contribute to our local economies. But when you talk about destroying our public school system, you really start looking at the destruction of our cities and our towns, even more so. Companies, on average, don't move into an area because of certain tax breaks unless it's pretty damn significant. They move in when there's good roads and good schools. And a good educated workforce.
I've been told companies look for right to work policies, and they look for the lowest taxes possible, and applicable work. That's what they look for. They don't look for any of that education or road stuff.
Well, you look at Kansas. They did this huge tax cut, one of the biggest ones in history in the state of Kansas last year, and now their per pupil spending has plummeted, and all of those jobs that they thought would come immediately crawling into Kansas never came. And they're facing a huge deficit this year, and we'll do so simply because they implemented those recommendations of these huge corporate tax cuts.
See, but we see that in state after state, Jen. And here in Pennsylvania, it's the same story. Our governor cut $1 billion from public education, and then went and handed $2.2 billion to big corporations in the hope of luring them here, and yet, according to the Wall Street Journal, the newspaper of the investor class, Pennsylvania has the 4th slowest growing economy in the country. It just doesn't work. When do we wake up?
I mean, I think we have to wake up. I think it's shows like yours. I think it's unions being involved and our members talking to their community and their neighbors. Literally, I mentioned it earlier. Unions are the last line of defense and kind of the last check on corporate greed in this country. Interesting enough, AFSCME this year, we know this is coming. We all see it every single year. Every election is just as important as the last one. Every year is just as hard as the previous one. And so AFSCME this year embarked on a campaign to organize 50,000 new workers across this country. And in a convention in July, our leadership announced that, and we didn't just hit 50,000, that 92,000 workers in this country joined AFSCME this year. So the writing's on the wall. They want a union. Workers in this country want a union. They want to have 27% higher wages. They want to have health insurance. They want retirement security. And so as much as we're under attack, I think that we unions as a whole, we need to fight back and educate our not only our membership, but our local communities and our neighbors.
So let's talk freedom then. Because it was Freedom Week last week, and as we learned last week, there's no freedom other than the freedom to work for lower wages and bad conditions. Let's talk about freedom. Why not the freedom to be able to join a union? Why not the freedom that my grandparents' generation had? Because if you go back and read the National Labor Relations Act, there's nothing in there that gives rights to employers. There was nothing in the original act because they knew employers had all the rights.
Right. Right, and that's a sad state of affairs. And you have a lot of folks, they've kind of won the anti-union and anti-worker class has really won the messaging argument about that. And I think you're absolutely right. It should not be about dropping your union. It should be about your right to join one. I mean, I'm working for AFSCME. I see every single day where there's complaints on management for union busting. And this is a concerted attack from freedom. This idea of Freedom Week is a concerted attack by the right wing to just go directly to our membership. When in reality, we should be having that conversation with our members alone, and they're not buying it. Honest to God, I think workers in this country are not buying that argument to drop their union. I think folks realize that this is a critical threat, and unions are their only option to make sure they have a better working condition and better salaries and better wages and benefits.
And we're seeing that across the country as fast food workers are in the streets. You've got the Walmart workers. You've got the port truck drivers in the streets saying, we want better wages, better hours, better conditions. But more importantly than those, we want respect.
Right, absolutely. I think every worker wants that. And typically when you have a unionized workforce, you have that odd thing called a voice on the job, where you can sit down and actually offer up ideas to actually make it more efficient and effective in service delivery. Unions aren't just about wages. We're also about making sure that the services we provide are professional and done in an efficient manner.
So let me ask you this, in the last line of questioning I've got for you, because they put all of this money into Freedom Week, much like they put into Right to Work, even though we know there are no rights, and obviously, given the last couple of years, no work. What freedoms? Why do we talk about this? It got almost no attention in the mainstream corporate-controlled media, other than the little sects that are controlled by the Koch brothers and ALEC and their ilk. Why should we be aware of this?
Well, I think for a long time, Right to Work wasn't people didn't know a lot about it, and I think also paycheck deception and these bills that we've seen across the country, we weren't discussing where these attacks are coming from and what the intent behind them was. We're living in a day and age where 8 Americans in this country, just 8 people, make more than 3.6 million minimum wage earners combined, and if we don't start talking about what's coming after labor, what's coming after the middle class, we have to go immediately on the defense. We should be on the offense, ready to go and educate our members, and letting them know where this deceptive campaign is coming from, and to open their eyes. If we don't, then we lose the argument.
Yeah, I mean, the whole Right to Work thing, we did kind of fall behind on, because people actually think that I should have the right to work, I should have the right to a job and to be able to support my family, but that's not what their scheme is, nor is actual freedom to have anything to do with this latest scheme.
Right, absolutely. We should have you said it perfectly. We should have the freedom to join a union. That's what this focus should be on.
Jane Carter, I appreciate you taking time for us. Thanks for filling us in on the euphemistic Freedom Week. I appreciate it.
Thanks so much for having me.
Let's take a quick break. Right back. 1-888-520-RICK. 1-888-520-7425. This is The Rick Smith Show. We're working people. Come to talk.
You're listening to The Rick Smith Show, where working people come to talk.
The world in 2. I'm your host, Luke Vargas, reporting for Talk Radio News Service at the United Nations. 1 week ago, the U.S. entered the global spotlight after an unarmed black man was killed by police in the town of Ferguson, Missouri, prompting protests and a massive response by heavily armed cops. Talk Radio News Service correspondent Justin Duckham is on the ground in Ferguson.
Last night, the community underwent yet another night of looting. Today, we're seeing a much more organized scene. We see a lot of outside groups gathering here now. One of the folks who runs a local electronics shop said that probably about a dozen people there who brought brooms and paper and plastic bags to help clean up the mess.
Civic order may be returning to Ferguson, but images from last week presented a startling picture of the U.S. to a global audience, in which a decade-long push to respond to national security threats has left local police forces looking an awful lot like militaries.
That's been questioned as creating incentives for local and state police to use that equipment even if it's not necessary. And that's really problematic under international human rights standards.
Maria McFarland Sanchez Moreno is the Deputy U.S. Program Director for Human Rights Watch.
Police forces are only supposed to use force when it's absolutely necessary and only to the degree necessary to control unlawful protests. But it's not something you should just resort to as a matter of course, which seems to be what's happening here.
Sanchez Moreno says the strong-armed approach to fighting drugs and crime is backfiring.
You know, you fill these prisons with low-level offenders. You give police departments a lot of big toys to play with, and you end up with what looks like more lawlessness instead of actually addressing real problems.
For more global news headlines, visit talkradionews.com.
Tales of American Political History with Clinton Porter Hackney.
In 1971, an immigrant couple came to New York City, each with a visitor's visa. However, the husband had a problem. He had a criminal record in his homeland of the United Kingdom, though it was a pretty short rap sheet. In his earlier years, London police had found cannabis in his apartment, and he had pleaded guilty to possession. In the spring of the following year, the couple was told by authorities that they could no longer stay in the United States because the feds were required to deport all immigrants previously convicted of a crime. So the couple hired a New York immigration lawyer, and they ended up with a good one. Leon Wiles was a well-respected attorney in the field of immigration law. He was active in the American Bar Association and nationally known. But this would be a tough one. Join us again for Wiles' interesting case. This is Clinton Porter Hackney at cphackney.com.
Chances are, when you took a shower this morning, an AFSCME member made sure that water was clean. When you drove to work, an AFSCME member maintained the road. When you rode an elevator, an AFSCME member inspected it. I'm David Philman, Executive Director of AFSCME Council 13, the American Federation of State, County, and Municipal Employees. AFSCME members enforce regulations, keep prisoners behind bars, take care of patients, protect the environment, and more. The work isn't glamorous, the salaries aren't high, but AFSCME members serve the public in every aspect of our daily lives. Chances are, you'll never see that AFSCME member working in a sewage plant, diving underwater to repair a bridge, or answering a 911 call. But aren't you glad they do? For more information, visit AFSCME13.org. We are AFSCME.
Where family values are more than slogans. The Rick Smith Show.
Times like these you learn to live again. It's times like these you live and live again. It's times like these you learn to love again.
Yes, freedom! Yeah, freedom. Gotta love the freedom angle. It's Freedom Week, don't you know? Freedom! And, you know, as we talked about last week, the whole freedom that this state policy network wants is the freedom for your kids to go hungry. I mean, really, that's the end of this. And it goes back to something my grandfather always said, and I've said it on this program before. If a rich guy's going to take a buck out of his pocket to tell you you don't need something, you better spend two to get it. That's simple. Because they understand return on investment. They understand that if they put this dollar down, when Richard Mellon Scaife spends $1 million, as it's been reported, to fund a right-wing rag magazine, he knows he's getting back hearts and minds. He knows that you keep putting this stuff out, people are going to read it, it's going to get shared, and it's going to be part of that right-wing sphere, if you will, where it's this incestuous pool of people citing each other's work in this bizarre little world of right-wing insanity. And as long as you stay to the court, to that narrow, confined area of thought, you're going to be well funded and you're going to live a decent life. As long as you follow along with what the billionaires want, which is to make sure that all of the other people who are listening or following or are talking to you, they begin to follow you. Which is why right-wing radio has done so well over the years. Because it's about taking people's rights away. It's about, well, honestly and truthfully, it's about the control of the few. And I go back to Diane Hendricks, the billionaire. You may have seen the clip of her talking to Scott Walker, and in an almost orgasmic fashion. When will we pass her right to work? Why does a billionaire care about that? Why would a billionaire who can, many times over, why would she care about that? Again, it comes back down to that power, that control. It doesn't get any simpler. And what's really kind of bizarre to me is that we buy it. That you and I and the rest of us, we kind of buy into it. To where, we don't question anymore. We don't stop and say, hey, this is ridiculous. And it makes me kind of go, we got work to be doing. And we got work to do now. But freedom, yes, freedom. Let's take a quick break. Right back. Have some freedom.
Rick Smith Show, changing America for the better.
Another day of sudden flood emergencies and high water rescues, this time in Long Island, New York.
Historic storms and flooding paralyze cities across the U.S. California breaks heat records again. China breaks solar investment records. Plus,
there's some nutcases in our country that don't believe in global warming.
President Jimmy Carter criticizes climate-denying Republicans.
All of those nutcases and more straight ahead. From BradBlog.com, I'm Brad Friedman.
And I'm Desi Doyen.
Stand by for 6 minutes of independent green news, politics, analysis, and snarky comment.
This episode uses strong, potentially offensive language to refer to climate deniers, but it's probably still not strong or offensive enough.
Ooh, Jay. To our snarky comment game. Well snarked, Jay. This is your Green News Report. Okay, Desi Doyen, we talked about it in our report earlier this week, but the rains had not finished yet in Detroit and had not even gotten to Long Island by that time.
Oh, yeah, the extreme weather hits just keep on coming. Historic deluges and dangerous flash floods breaking records across the eastern half of the U.S. this week, demonstrating the multiple, serious, and expensive impacts of global warming that are increasingly overwhelming our aging infrastructure. In Detroit,
the ground came up, and I just remember screaming at him, saying that we gotta go. It's not safe.
A record deluge caused historic flooding in the Motor City on Monday that turned highways into rivers, killing 2 people, and also backed up the city's sewage system into the streets. Days later, divers are still searching for victims in completely submerged cars. In Nebraska, a hospital security camera caught the power and speed of a massive flash flood that burst through the doors of the hospital with the speed and force of a tsunami. Several cities, from Arizona to Massachusetts, saw record flooding, but none so much as the Long Island town of Islip in New York State, which recorded 13 inches of rain in just 3 hours, unprecedented in state history.
When was the last time you've seen it this bad?
I actually worked during Hurricane Sandy, and it's been that kind of day.
Islip broke the New York State record for heaviest rainfall in a one-day period that was set during Hurricane Irene. But this was not a hurricane.
No, this was just Wednesday.
Right. Now, why is this happening all at once?
Why is this happening all at once?
Funny you should ask. NBC News reports it's changes in the jet stream.
According to a recent study, extreme weather is due to a rise in blocking patterns, That's when hot or wet weather stays stuck over a region for an extended period of time.
Most scientists are not surprised. They've actually seen this coming for a while. We've seen these type of blocking weather patterns almost double in the last decade.
We've seen it coming for a while. We've talked about it on this show for a while. Scientists have been warning about it for a very long time, all during which the denialists out there have just been ignoring it as if there's nothing to see here, no concerns.
Right, and of course good for NBC for mentioning that increase in blocking patterns, making extreme weather events more common.
So a blocking pattern is basically what?
Melting sea ice in the Arctic is changing the atmospheric air temperature. That's changing the jet stream, slowing it down, and that's what causes these blocking patterns.
So the systems stall, they can't move across the country as they normally would. Instead, they get blocked in place and just drop all of this water in one place?
Yep, but what NBC didn't tell you was the rest of the story. That new study also concluded that human-caused global warming is driving that increase in blocking patterns and extreme weather events. It's the opposite effect in California, where extended record drought is sending shockwaves through the global food market, raising food prices. And not helping, California is also crushing heat records. The first 7 months of this year were the hottest ever recorded in the Golden State, meaning that 2014 is likely to beat 2013 as California's hottest year on record.
So the fact that I have been whining about how warm it is out here in California over the past 7 or 8 months is not my imagination.
That's right. Now, the solution to this, says former President Jimmy Carter,
is denying it?
No, it's to cut emissions.
We need something like a carbon tax, which I think is the only reasonable approach.
In an appearance at a renewable energy conference in Aspen, Colorado, the 89-year-old conservationist who established the Department of Energy and warned of the need to act on global warming while in office way back in the 1970s, he laid the blame for inaction squarely on Republican climate deniers.
I would say the biggest handicap we have right now is some nutcases in our country that don't believe in global warming.
But finally, some good news in China. They're already taking action. The city of Beijing just announced it is banning coal in its districts by 2020, and a new report shows China has installed more solar power in just the last 6 months than the U.S. currently has in existence.
Impossible. Fox News has told me over and over again that we can do whatever we want about global warming, but China doesn't care, and they're going to keep emitting. I guess Fox News was wrong again.
Yep.
Go figure. For much more on those stories and the ones we couldn't get to, please check out our website at greennews.bradblog.com. While you're there, please consider a donation to help the Green News Report stay on your public airwaves. From bradblog.com, I'm Brad Friedman.
And I'm Desi Doyen.
And this has been your Green News Report.
Waving the flag of freedom for people, not corporations. Rick Smith.
We want the world and we want it now. We're going to take it anyhow. We want the airwaves. We want the airwaves. That's right, that's right. We want the airwaves, baby. If rock is supposed to stay alive.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. We're at the Sheraton Hotel here in Philadelphia at the Teamsters National Black Caucus Convention, their 39th convention. If you missed any portion of it, thericksmithshow.com. I'd love to hear your thoughts, your comments, questions, whatever's on your mind as you listen to today's program. You can email me, Rick, at thericksmithshow.com. Hit us up on the Twitters, at Rick Smith Show, Facebook, the Rick Smith Show right there. Everything right there at the website. One of the things I like about this is, again, you get to talk to people from all over the country who are doing great work, but also, fighting the good fight. And I'm sitting here with Eric Thornton. He's from Atlanta, Georgia, business agent down there, a right-to-work state. And if you remember, we had talked extensively about some of the insane ALEC-type pieces of legislation that they were trying to ram through there. A lot of the same stuff that we see here in Pennsylvania. Eric, thanks for taking time for us.
Thank you, Rick.
You look at this convention, 500 people from across the country with varied stories and different experiences, and I find this to be quite exciting.
It is. It's always a great opportunity to get a wealth of knowledge and exchange stories that you can take back and use, because it is a fight. It is a tough fight. It's a constant struggle.
I look here in Pennsylvania. We've always got the ALEC type legislation, the American Legislative Exchange Council. The Koch brother approved the legislation banging around right to work, paycheck deception, trying to make it illegal for communities to pass paid sick day ordinances, all of those things. But I look at right to work states, like Texas and Mississippi and of course Atlanta, Georgia, and still the anti-worker legislation, even further to the extremes, still banging around in states like yours.
Yeah, I mean, we, like you and I talked earlier, we just had a situation last year, State Bill 469, which was produced by Senator Balfour, who he's about to go to jail because he was indicted and he was found guilty.
What did he do? What did he do?
Well, he was taking money that he shouldn't have been taking.
Oh, no surprise there.
But this is a multimillionaire. This guy here is on the board of directors at Waffle House. Okay, but he's introducing a bill, Bill 469. This bill tried to tax public and private sector union members. I mean, this bill wanted us, your term would be 12 months. Every month, every year, you would have to re-sign up all our members. Okay, at UPS, we got probably around 360,000 members in the United States, and we're expected to sign them up on a yearly contract. We would spend more money in organizing.
Well, that's the point, isn't it?
Absolutely.
Busy work.
Absolutely. Not only that,
because if you're spending all that time doing that, you're not going after them.
Absolutely. Just like AT&T last year. This bill, had it been put into place, if you participated in a picketing, each individual would have been fined $1,000 per person, and the organization would have been fined $10,000 per person. You can't effectively present a protest without picketing.
Exactly.
And to put that intimidation and scare tactics in people, we don't need that.
And there is that Constitution thing that they keep talking about. Something about freedom of assembly, something like that?
Well, let me tell you about freedom of assembly. That when that bill was in legislation last year, we were there until the last day of that session. We were there. The session ended at midnight. Okay, when they went to the lunch break from 5 to 7, the dinner break, they came back at 7. They had pulled all public sector unions out of it because we had private sector, we had policemen, firemen, and they came back at the dinner. Okay, the public sector, y'all to say, y'all can go home. Y'all not even attached to this bill.
We'll get you next year.
So at that point, it was personal because you personally said we want the public. We want these private individuals. We want the people to have the right to do this. We want to take their right from them. Even up until the 11th hour, they had 45 state. And we're at the state capitol, where we're supposed to
people's house,
where we're supposed to feel safe and comfortable. They brought in 45 Georgia State patrols, lined the inside of the gallery, and they're passing around zip ties. So each patrolman has 5 or 6. How can you feel safe and comfortable when the purpose and intent is to intimidate you like that? And at 12 o'clock, we prevail for now.
Right.
just for now, because
that stuff never goes away.
It's coming back in a different form. And how befitting the person to introduce that end up being convicted of a crime. Go figure.
Maybe we got a zip tie for him.
I'm pretty sure they do.
But here again, it takes me back to this, this assault on work in this country, this assault on workers and their bargaining units, and it's all about the power and control.
It is definitely about the power and control. It's about the money, Do you
really think it's just about the money? Because I think it's more about, if you've seen the video of Scott Walker and the woman who's the billionaire owner of ABC Construction Company in Wisconsin, this Diane Hendricks, who was almost orgasmic over asking the question when Wisconsin was going to pass right to work. And I don't think it's how much more money does she need? I think it's just about the unadulterated, pure power of just pointing and snapping the fingers and you better know how to jump or you're fired.
I think it is. I think to a certain point it is about the money, because you have these mega corporations that, perfect example, Coca-Cola. Atlanta, Georgia was the headquarters. I mean, they're right across the street from the Capitol, the world of Coke, and everything's like, they've hooked up with the tourist industry. They got all these people coming in.
Right.
Okay, now we take on a campaign with Coca-Cola, and you've got this big target, and you're drawing all this attention to your headquarters. So you're going to take $3 million and move from a great location, you know your earning potential. Move it out to the suburbs where you're less of focus because out of sight is out of mind.
Right.
You not only you just save your money, you know, in that campaign they spent over $1.2 million in that campaign just in fines.
Wow.
You know, I mean, you know, I worked on that campaign. You know, I was there when Coca-Cola brought in off-duty state patrols at the time clock. And if you had on any paraphernalia, you were harassed, jacked up, clothes wrinkled, hat snatched off. I mean, we had grown men coming down there crying, wanting to know, what could we do? We'll file a charge. We'll file a charge. That's calculated money. That is about the money.
Yeah.
You know?
You know, when I hear that stuff, you know, we like to think in this country that we're better than that. That we have labor protection, that there are these labor laws that are there to protect us. But the sad reality is they're really not all. There's no bite there. There's no teeth in the bite.
Well, I mean, to a certain extent, but until we get more people educated and understanding that you do have a right to speak your mind and stand up and have a right to work how you want to work within the confines of whatever your contractual agreement is without intimidation, then we got a problem.
Right. But what if you don't have a contract? What if you're, like here in Pennsylvania, if you don't have a union contract, you're an at-will employee. Your contract is I'm at will, and if you don't want me here, I'm fired. And my only recourse is to collect unemployment.
Well, and that's why I say, you know, you need to educate yourself and try to stay within the confines. You know, we all make choices. If you choose to settle for whatever reason,
right,
family-wise, monetary-wise, whatever reason that you choose to be in the situation that you are in, that's your choice. You know, I'm the type of person that educate me and let me make the choice. You know, the reason I became a steward was to take on the responsibility for people that did not want to stand up against, because you get people that just want to do their job.
Yep, and I understand that.
You know, you got 90% sheep. Somebody's got to be a shepherd. You know, and we really can't. While we want to help everybody, you can't help everybody. If somebody wants to just be a sheep, then wolf's got to get somebody. I hate to say it like that.
That's beautiful. So out of this convention, I mean, what are you hoping to take back? I mean, as you've said, you've been to a number of these. What are you hoping to take back to your community? What are you hoping to take back to your membership?
Well, it's always good to come and get educated on new techniques of dealing with the company, because they're doing the same thing. They're teaching classes. I teach all of my stewards. You know, the company is forever trying to educate themselves on ways to not only bend corners on the contract to get more out of you when there's no more to get. You know.
Or to start outsourcing and doing all the other things that we've seen all over the place.
Isn't that amazing?
It never ends. And I mean, it's the constant struggle. So when I see these conferences, and I like to hear what people want to take back with them and what they gain from these conferences.
Well, you gain the motivation to be more effective when you go back home. You know, when I come up here and the focal point is the fact that Michigan became a right to work state, and I say, you know what, there are so many people in Georgia that know nothing about that, but we automatically took a hit. And once you find out how it was done, that should motivate you to say, you know what, I need to encourage other people to join the struggle for work in America.
But as a right-to-work state, wouldn't you go, well, fine, we're a right-to-work state, they should be too? I mean, because you have that kind of mentality.
That's debatable.
Yeah, no, I think right-to-work is a horrible idea.
Mm-hmm.
I think that government should stay out of my ability to negotiate with an employer. You get these Republicans who want government out of our lives, except in employment contracts where we're going to say that there are things that you can't negotiate on, which is insane to me.
I mean, but we were talking about the money earlier. Perfect example. I've been with UPS 29 years. The difference in UPS is great to come up here and talk to some of my brothers that work in a closed shop state, because perfect example. We recently got a new upper level management person from UPS moved down from a closed shop state. Of course, doing the information background, come to find out that UPS paid $1 million to one of his own employees that was a management person because of the treatment of this person. The right to work state, they ain't spending no $1 million.
Yeah.
He would have been fired. It would have been next. So the mentality is that we're going to bring people that so-called can have union experience and can deal with unions down to a right to work state. Is not going to work because they don't deal with the same type of issue. But it's amazing to me because it's unheard of. UPS is not in Georgia. They're not spending $1 million to support a manager that's wrong. It ain't happening. Closed shop state, and they'll tax it to the members. Let it ride.
Wow, interesting stuff. So yeah, wow. So when you go back, give me one thing that you learned here that you didn't know.
I think the one thing I need that I'll definitely take back is that we need to continue to educate one another about the importance of engaging in this battle.
There you go.
Because that's what it is. It's going to be a consistent battle.
And I keep saying that, you know, my generation kind of, and maybe the generation before me, kind of thought, well, you know, we have all these things, and our grandparents fought for this, and it's always been this way, and the benevolent corporation gives us all these wonderful things. And as these last 30 years have passed, those things are being taken away, and at an alarming pace.
And one thing that I really like, one of the classes that they're teaching here is Black people of labor from Pennsylvania, and it's always great to find out people who are effective in that state to help progress organized labor.
Yep.
It's about education. It's about education, taking something back that you can motivate somebody else to grab hold.
Spreading the good word.
Yes, sir.
Eric, I appreciate the time, man.
All right, thank you very much.
Thanks so much. Let's take a quick break. Right back after this. Stick around. We're in Philadelphia, the Teamsters National Black Caucus Convention. Right back after this.
We gotta do it today. No more madness than good. No more misery. We gotta get over tonight.
You're listening to The Rick Smith Show.
The story exploding out of Ferguson, Missouri is doubly infuriating. First, there is the obvious outrage of yet another unarmed black teenager, Michael Brown, being stopped by one of the town's white police officers as he was walking to his grandmother's house. The scuffle ensued and Brown was shot to death by the officer. He was then left lying in the street for hours, during which time the police didn't even bother to notify his family. Understandably, furious citizens have erupted in protest. Outrage number two is that Ferguson's police, practically all of whom are white in a town that's two-thirds black, did not respond to the public outcry like police officers, but like an occupying army. What was needed was a calm, professional, and empathetic response. Instead, the police confronted Ferguson with full military force, rolling out in armored Bearcat vehicles, hovering helicopters, riot gear, camouflage outfits, and body armor. They approached the unarmed citizens with assault rifles, grenades, tear gas, nightsticks, and a macho attitude. It was a tactical commando assault on civilians, the vast majority of whom were doing what they should be doing, calling autocrats to account. But wait. Where did this tiny town's police force, supposedly made up of peace officers, get such weaponry and a military attitude? From the Pentagon, which has quietly been militarizing America's police departments for the last 2 decades, sending billions of dollars worth of Bearcats, helicopters, machine guns, etc. to any Mayberry police chief with Rambo fantasies. This is Jim Hightower saying, your town and mine are being militarized too. We must halt this perversion of proper policing, or we'll be the next Ferguson. For starters, tell your governor, don't militarize my block. You can do it by going to www.change.org/petitions.
Hightower's commentaries are brought to you by the Hightower Lowdown, the monthly newsletter with Hightower's take on what Wall Street and Washington are up to. For information, visit hightowerlowdown.org.
Standing up to conservatives and corporatists every weeknight. The Rick Smith Show.
I'm just an average man with an average life. I work from 9 to 5. Hey, hell, I pay the price. All I want is to be left alone in my average home. But why do I always feel like I'm in the twilight zone? And I always feel like somebody's watching me.
And welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Check out the website, thericksmithshow.com. Questions, comments, something on your mind, you can email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. As you can hear, the attendees here to the 39th annual Teamsters National Black Caucus Convention underway as folks are filing out of the hall. You're hearing the background noise and the people. About 500 attendees as I get the number. And I've got one of the attendees here, a rank and file member from Toronto, Canada, Hugh Reid. Hugh, thanks for taking time for us.
You're welcome.
So what do you think of this affair?
Event is great. I look forward to it every year.
And this is your what? Your second, third?
This is my ninth.
Ninth year.
Yeah.
And how does this compare to ones of the past, do you think?
Well, there's something new every year because you get to meet new people. There's always new people coming. The other people that's been coming for past years, and the seminars in the classroom that we've done is excellent.
And
Great tool to take back to Toronto.
And what do you hope to take back? I mean, because I'm sure every year you take something new back. What do you hope to take back this year?
Organizing skill, dealing with people, diversity. Those are the things I look forward to coming every year and improve on, because as a union steward at UPS, that comes to the forefront.
It's all about taking those skills back and maybe helping along some other folks along with you.
Yes, that's the idea. That's why my locals send me every year.
And from Canada.
Yeah.
That's I didn't think of this as an international event, but
well, the labor movement is pretty strong in Canada too.
No, actually much stronger in Canada than the U.S.
Yes,
because your laws are a lot different than ours.
Yes.
I would argue better.
Yes, somewhat, very better. But what it does, it opens up our eyes, because unless you know what's going on south of us, you don't really appreciate what you really have at home.
Yeah, good point.
So
you go back and tell horror stories then, right?
Not
oh my
really,
goodness, they've got at-will employment laws.
No, I just tell them how fortunate we are.
Yeah.
And so our government situation is somewhat different than how things work in Canada, in the U.S. So
maybe your government's a little more functional?
Yes.
Because Washington seems to be nothing but dysfunction anymore at this point.
Hopefully that will improve, though.
Yeah. So what brings you to these things? You're a rank and file member. I'm always surprised when I see rank and file guys showing up to these things, because usually I think it's business agents and people who are the leadership hierarchy.
Well, as a union steward, eventually I would like to grow in the union.
Right.
And so the way to grow is to be in these seminars and gain the education, the experience, the knowledge, and the confidence. And so eventually, someday I may want to be a vice president or a business agent for the local, and that's my dream. That's my goal.
And gain that knowledge that you take back. Because one of the things that I've often said, and I don't know how it is in Canada, maybe you could tell me, but our education system has walked away from labor history or labor education, and in fact, in most instances, has rewritten labor's history. So I'm not sure if it's the same in Canada, but it's about members talking to members about the history of their union and the history of work in this country.
It's somewhat similar to the state, because we're so much influenced in Canada from what goes on to the States. It's like a trend we intend to follow.
Right.
But it's up to the individual local to really get out there and educate the members. And so my local 938 really does go out of his way to do that.
Did you have a union background before you got the job at UPS? Was it a family thing, or is it? Because some of these people I talk to, they're generational. They had a strong labor background to begin with. Some people, they came to it and they immediately got it and became involved.
Well, in a sense, I'm a first generation, because my parents, being a naturalized Jamaican, we didn't really have a strong labor movement in Jamaica, so I really can't speak on that. But
right.
The moment I got involved, I love it, because I saw an avenue where there's a door there that opens up that makes life that much more better for the average person.
And that's the message that I try and convey. I think of myself. I grew up in a housing project on the west side of Cleveland, and it was that union card. I worked hard, and I would have worked hard no matter what, but it was that contract and that union card that made my life ultimately much better.
Makes us equal. And it doesn't matter where you're from, your background, you're a Teamster, you're a union member, and your brotherhood. And that's what we live for.
Yeah. When you're out there organizing, you're talking to someone who, maybe like you or didn't really know, doesn't have any background into it. How do you approach them?
Well, first you want to find out what they're really looking for, and so you introduce them to the union and say, listen, as a brother and as Teamster, we're really here to support you, because there's ups and downs in life, and a lot of time you really need to know that somebody's there to support you,
right?
And build their confidence to be part of the movement.
Yeah, because a lot of my listeners, they're not union members. They have probably never had any exposure to unions and don't really other than this program, have no access or information about. So I'm always interested in finding out how other people say, hey, this is why this is important.
It makes your life somewhat more easier, because in life we have a lot of things to deal with, and so knowing that you have a strong union, you got strong support, you got strong members, it really makes coming to work somewhat more different and better. And so we strive for that.
And it empowers. I mean, for me, it's having that voice, having that piece of paper that says this contract is what we agreed to on both sides of the fence, not just on the labor side, but also on the management side.
Yes, and it makes us equal, and everyone strive for equality, and it really does makes us equal.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And again, I think makes things run smoother. If everyone knows what they're supposed to be doing and everyone does what they're supposed to be doing, I think things work better.
There's a saying that if you know your rights, you know how to conduct yourself properly. So from a management side, it's easier for management, it's easier for the workers, because they know what's expected both ways, and life becomes that much more easier for everybody.
Now, and bringing it back to this convention here in Philadelphia, what kind of things, what kind of courses have you taken? I know they had a number of breakout sessions. What's been interesting to you?
Well, the course I took yesterday, I really looked into how to conduct a meeting. So a lot of time when you go into a grievance meeting, it's empower you to take control of that meeting, because in most cases the management interpret the contract in a certain way. So if you kind of take control, it goes your way a lot of time.
If you know what you're talking about,
that's right. Yes.
It's much easier to win an argument if you know what you're talking about. Generally, the guy who screams the loudest doesn't win those.
No, it's being organized. If you're organized, you got all your ducks in line, and you got things documented, you'd be surprised how you just take control of the conversation.
Yeah,
and be a good listener.
And that's the important part, actually listening to the words that are being used in opposition. I remember when I was a steward for a number of years, I would go to these kind of functions, and people say, oh, you're just there having a party and having a good time. But this is actually work.
Yes, somewhat. For me, it's actually really work, because I actually work harder this week than I do on my regular job.
Oh, don't say that.
No, I really do. I really do. And it's a message I'd like to give out to the members, because they see this as a vacation. I work afternoons. I'm not accustomed to being up at this time in the morning.
Okay. I'm with you. I was a night guy, so waking up at 6 o'clock in the morning to get prepped and do all that stuff, it's a little more
I don't
difficult.
function well then, so getting up 6 o'clock to go get breakfast and then doing all this stuff is different.
So what are you hoping when you get back that you'll be able to, out of this, do better?
Well, like I do every year, the first couple of months when I go back, I really try to introduce people to the TNBC. We're looking at somewhat, hopefully, form a chapter in Toronto.
Bringing in new members.
Yes, and so I do that for the first couple of weeks, and then I just get right back into using the skill that I picked up here and just be a better union steward, a better communicator, and a better listener to my members, and they see the difference.
Do you see, because I had a couple of emails from folks last night that, this is the Teamsters National Black Caucus convention. And the emails I got back are, isn't that something that separates people within the membership? That you have these divisions that are created. I'm curious what your thoughts are on that.
No, don't misunderstand. We're true and true Teamsters. That will never change. I'm a Teamster.
Right.
It just so happened that I'm a black member, and so what happened by getting the black members together, we share stories of each other's, because a lot of time you don't really know what other people go through until you get together, and so you learn from them, and we have one central voice, which is our president, who takes that information to the IBT.
Right.
But we're Teamsters. I am a Teamster.
Good. Yeah. No. I mean, and that was some of the questioning and some of the back and forth. And I think it's a great thing. I think it's a great thing where you have people who can come together and talk about issues that are important.
I'll explain something for a reason. When I start coming here, my president for local, the reason why I actually do it in Toronto, 25% of our members are black.
Okay.
And they don't show up at a meeting. And so they don't have a voice. So I become their voice by being here, and I can go back and report and try to get them involved, because even with the IBT at the level, a lot of members come to work and they just want to go home. They don't really want to get involved, and so they're out of touch. And so we're sending a message that the reason why we have the TNBC is to say to them, listen, you may not want to go on the IBT website because you can't relate to that, but you can relate to the TNBC. But we're still Teamsters. Okay, the same thing that IBT is saying, we're saying it. just from a different avenue.
Now, you're just talking about it. That's a good way of putting it.
Yes.
So this will wrap up tomorrow with a march, as I understand, right?
Yes, we're going to do a walk tomorrow.
And what's the march about?
Well, it's to celebrate the 50th year of the signing of the
Voting Rights Act.
Yes. Yeah, so, and every time we go to a city, we try to incorporate something like that to make a difference, to let them know that it's not going to be forgotten. We remembered, and we're going to make sure the world knows that we're here, and we'll never forget what happened.
There you go. Hugh, I appreciate you taking time for us. It was a pleasure to talk to you, and I hope you enjoy the rest of your convention.
My first time at OPA, I did a good job.
There you
Thank
go. You did great. Thank you so much. Let's take a quick break here from Philadelphia, the Teamsters National Black Caucus Convention. Stick around. You're listening to The Rick Smith Show. For working people, come to talk.
And the kids locked in the Capitol are fighting till the end. And we're not gonna break tonight, and we're not gonna bend. Some say the union's down, but I asked around, and everybody said, this is a union town, all down the line. This is a union town, all down the line. And if they come to strip our rights away, we'll give them hell every time. This is a union town, all down the line.
Remembering that united we bargain, divided we beg.
On June 25, 1938, President Franklin Delano Roosevelt signed the Fair Labor Standards Act into law. Viewed as one of the final pieces of legislation of FDR's New Deal and the single most worker-friendly piece of legislation ever written, the Fair Labor Standards Act of 1938 was a victory not only for labor unions, but for workers, families, and children across the country. FDR called the new law the most far-reaching, far-sighted program for the benefit of workers ever adopted in this or any other country. This visionary piece of legislation put a ceiling over hours and a floor under wages, mandating a 44-hour work week, a 25-cent minimum wage, and time and a half for overtime. The Fair Labor Standards Act was later amended to 40 hours per week and 40 cents per hour. The law also excluded children from working dangerous jobs and set standard conditions for the employment of child workers to avoid continued exploitation of children. The Fair Labor Standards Act has been changed or amended at least 43 different times. These alterations have been used both to expand worker protections, such as raising the minimum wage, prohibiting age discrimination, and requiring equal pay, and to restrict and take away protections such as the Taft-Hartley Act and the 2004 Fair Pay Amendment. Today, we take the 40-hour work week, minimum wages, overtime, and child labor protections for granted. But up until the passage of the Fair Labor Standards Act, workers were at the mercy of their employers and children were dying in industrial accidents. This Rick Smith Show Labor History Moment was made possible by a grant from the Labor Education Center at IUP. For more information, visit www.thericksmithshow.com.
You're listening to The Rick Smith Show. For more information, go to thericksmithshow.com. If you've missed any portion of the program, you can download the podcast at thericksmithshow.com.
You're listening to WIN, Workers Independent News, a production of Diversified Media Enterprises. I'm Doug Cunningham. Hundreds of protesters picketed West Coast ports from Oakland to Los Angeles over the weekend, preventing the offloading of cargo from an Israeli Zim shipping line vessel for 24 hours. It was a protest against Israeli military attacks on civilians in Gaza that so far have killed nearly 2,000, injured many thousands more, and devastated billions of dollars of homes and infrastructure. The International Longshore and Warehouse Union did not officially endorse the protest, but ILWU workers in Oakland refused to cross the picket lines and canceled shifts, citing safety concerns. Steve Zeltzer is a rank-and-file CWA media worker and host of Workweek Radio on KPFA.
The rank and file have a history of not crossing picket lines and supporting international solidarity actions. There was a protest in Long Beach. There was a protest in New York. There was also a protest at the Zim offices in Tokyo. So this is part of an international action to call for a labor blockade of Israel by labor worldwide.
UAW Local 2865, representing academic student workers at the University of California, did support the effort to close the ports to the Israeli ship. This unidentified protester in Oakland urged union members nationwide to take a stand on the killing of civilians in Gaza.
Our goal is to block the offloading of that ship for 24 hours and to send messages to union members all over the country and all over the world to take a stand against these policies that are illegal, inhumane, and immoral.
The International Transport Workers Federation's 43rd Global Conference wrapped up over the weekend in Sofia, Bulgaria. The ITF consists of 360 unions from 116 countries. It has 4.5 million members. Tim Beattie is Director of Global Strategies for the Teamsters Union in the United States. From the ITF conference, Beattie spoke with Canada's Radio Labour about global efforts to organize workers at delivery companies like DHL, FedEx, and UPS.
For DHL workers around the world to be able to organize has been extremely important for us. We assisted Tumtis in Turkey in their first organizing drive with UPS. That's a well-organized company in the United States. And we encouraged them to organize at DHL and provided solidarity when they were organizing in the form of training and also pressure on the company. But we said that they weren't going to be able to maintain a good contract with UPS if they didn't organize the competitors. And so Tumtis smartly began to organize in the rest of the sector, including with DHL. We're very pleased with the result and encourage workers worldwide at UPS, at FedEx, and at DHL to organize, because if we can organize throughout the parcel system, we'll create a high standard for all the workers in the industry.
You've been listening to WIN, Workers Independent News. For more information, visit laborradio.org.
Not right wing, just right. The Rick Smith Show.
When you get out the sounds of the truth, locked off each I got the rest, so I can't raise my fist. You can't kill the protester. You can't kill the protest. You can't murder the rebel.
Check out the website, thericksmithshow.com. Questions, comments, something on your mind. Email me, Rick at thericksmithshow.com. Back here at the Teamsters National Black Caucus Convention here in Philadelphia. And as always, if you missed any portion of our convention coverage, ricksmithshow.com. That's where you go to get the podcast. Make sure you get that. Also, the app on the smartphone. Don't forget that. Take the program on the go wherever you go. One of the things I love about coming to these things, and I think I've said this before, is you get to grab people and hear interesting stories. You may remember a couple of years ago we talked about going to New Orleans, and every time the anniversary of the storm comes around, we get people that we've met in the area to come talk to us. But here at the convention, I ran into Stephen Sorrell. He is a business agent with the Teamsters down in Louisiana, right?
Yes.
Who is from New Orleans. And I thought it'd be a great opportunity, Stephen, to talk about what the aftermath has been, what the rebuilding process, what things are like, because I have my perspective of what I saw, but you're living it.
Well, some people still think that we're still dealing with water, but that's no longer the case. The city has pretty much came back in full. We are a very functional city. I think the hardest recovery has been for the kids that were affected by it, because during that time I had 3 daughters, 2 of whom who are in college now, but at that time were about maybe 9 and 8, and I had another daughter that was 5. So I think it impacted the kids a lot. There was a lot of adjustments as far as new schools, new people, new friends, and just getting started with life. Originally, I came back to New Orleans, and pretty much everybody was living in trailers at that time.
Right.
I happened to be fortunate enough to find a home, and I purchased another home in another part of the city that wasn't affected by the water.
Because you lost everything, right?
Lost everything. I walked out with maybe 2 days of clothes for myself, my wife, and my 3 daughters, and I returned with nothing but what I left with. And it was basically a rebuilding of everything. I mean, I had to get transportation for the family, even the bare essentials like a fork, a knife, a spoon. We had nothing.
Right.
But I was fortunate enough to be employed, and I had a good job at that time, so I was able to recover a lot better than some of the other people. I have some friends that weren't as fortunate. Their jobs relocated. Some people just plain old went out of business. So the transition was easier for me because, of course, I worked for UPS for over 20 years at that time, and that that was maybe my rock at that point in time, because I had just what I needed to get back on my feet. My kids, on the other hand, they survived it. I mean, they had to adjust, but I think all in all, they've done well. They're now, 2 are in college, one's a junior in high school. And basically, as far as I'm concerned, the rebuilding is over. Life is normal for me and a lot of my other friends. So we just move on.
Yeah.
We're involved. We reach out to the community. It's been a good thing. I mean, some of the destruction you saw early on, you won't see anymore. There's still a few remnants around that will remind you of what happened on August 29th. That's one day that I don't think anybody that actually lived in New Orleans will ever forget. And every year around this time, it kind of brings back that memory. Fortunately, we've survived, and we haven't had any serious threats over the past 10 years. But that could change any given day.
You never know.
You never know. I think the thing I learned during this process was not to put value in material things, to maybe take the small things into consideration and stay close to family, because there were a lot of families that were actually destroyed by this situation.
And entire communities. I mean, when we were down there, I mean, it just entire communities washed away.
Washed away. Some can't come back. We happen to be in the heart of the city, so of course you're gonna recover a lot faster than some of the rural areas. Some areas I don't think are back today. I don't think some areas are even safe today. I think.
And why is that?
Well, because you have some people that actually lived in communities that were outside of the flood protection system. So there was nothing to really protect them from the rising waters versus those of us who lived inside of the protected wall. So that impacted, we all were affected, but where I may have had 9 feet of water in my area, those people had 30 feet of water. And I mean, they can't even find where their homes were.
Wow.
There's just nothing left. You found wildlife and everything, just trying to find the highest point in the area, and they just basically stood there. It was a disaster, but through it all, I mean, we made it by the grace of God. But we all took something home with that, and we learned to put the value in the real things, not so much the monetary things, because during this time, money was good, but money wasn't as important as family was, because we had a lot of people that were affected. I was fortunate enough to have the means to leave prior to the storm, basically by the will of my wife, because I probably would have been one of those that wouldn't have left.
You'd have been like me, because I wouldn't have left either. I'll stake my ground. I'm a man.
Yeah, that would have been the foolish decision to make. I saw that after the fact, but you never think something like that's going to happen. I think the overwhelming thing for me was the fact that I had 3 young daughters that were going to be affected. And although I would have been willing to jeopardize maybe my life, I couldn't see chance in their lives. So after a stern conversation with my wife in the middle of the night, we decided to leave. I think that's the best decision she made in our 20 years of marriage.
Other than marrying you, of course.
Well, that was a great decision, but I think I valued that one even more, because I don't think I would have been here, to be quite honest. And to see some of the things that my friends endured, those that survived, because I did have some friends that didn't survive, it's, all I could do was thank God, and thank God that I had the means to leave, because not everybody was that fortunate.
And that was the point that I learned when I got down there, because the news media had focused a lot on, well, you knew you should have gotten out. And I talked to a number of people who said, look, we get these kind of you should leave kind of warnings fairly often.
Right.
I don't have the money to walk across the street. How do you expect me to leave town every time there's one of these warnings when I don't have but enough money to put food on the table?
Well, to be quite honest with you, prior to Katrina, there was another storm a couple months, I'd say about maybe a couple months prior to that. It was a threat, but nothing like Katrina. And I don't think most of the families in New Orleans can afford to make multiple moves in the course of a 4-month period.
Right.
And we're on guard from the month of June until October. And that's a long period of time. A lot of families were just making it from day to day. So to say, hey, we're going to just pack up and leave, it's impossible for them. It's easier said than done. Like I said, I was fortunate enough to be able to just wake up in the middle of the night and leave. A lot of people didn't have that luxury. That's why you found so many families trapped at the Superdome or the convention center, because that was their only means of getting out.
Yeah.
I think the response time was pitiful, to be quite honest. And as I sat in Dallas in the comfort of a $400,000 home that one of my friends owned, I watched some of my other friends sitting down on the street, and I felt as though I was looking at a third world country, not necessarily a place where we were free and supposedly were our brother's keeper. It's just sometimes I get lost when I think about it, and
I get angry when I think about it, to be honest with you, because look, we left citizens behind. We left them and just watched.
Right.
And we at the time had an administration that in a very half-minded way did the least that they can do until there was enough public outrage.
Right. Well, for me, I couldn't understand. I mean, we can send a man to the moon, but we can't send a boat in to rescue people. And I think some of the treatment of the people was downright outrageous. I mean, this is something that nobody planned for, no one asked for. But
isn't this what FEMA is supposed to be planning for? Because as in my research of it and my understanding, they had known that this was possible from the mid-'90s forward. There were supposed to be contingency plans. In fact, there was supposed to be a plan to harden those walls and to make the levees stronger.
Well, there's always a plan.
Right.
But sometimes they're never really put into effect. And the funny thing about it, nobody wants to accept responsibility for the damage. You know, the Corps engineer, you can't sue them because they're the federal government.
Right.
But you have people that basically lost their lives, lost their property, their homes, because I think some of it was negligence, because some of the levees weren't really up to par. Because if you remember, the water didn't top the levees.
Nope.
The levees actually broke.
Yes.
And the damage that was caused in the lower Ninth Ward, which sustained the majority of the water, was actually caused by a barge that was sitting in the industrial canal. So if the government was so prepared, why would you have a barge just sitting out there in the canal? Why wasn't that moved? But those were questions, and this was a situation that no one ever thought would happen, but it did. So in hindsight, there's preparations being made, I'm hoping, but at the end of the day, I'm hoping we never see anything like that again in my lifetime, and maybe even my kids' lifetime. But that's God's will.
Yeah.
But I think it was a learning experience, and we really saw just how well our government handled major disasters. And I think since then you have the...
Well, let me ask you this, because, you know, I do look at government responses, and I say, you know, they do act in the best way possible in certain circumstances. And I've got to wonder, and I hate making things about race, but you've got to wonder if that had something to do with it on a certain level. That in areas where I've seen in the Midwest where you've had hurricanes, you've had tornadoes and stuff like that, they're Johnny on the spot. You know, things are moving almost right away. I didn't see that with Katrina.
Well, I mean, prior to Katrina, I'm trying to think what was the...
You look at the hurricanes before Katrina. They were in Florida within hours. They were in Alabama within hours with the hurricanes before that. But then again, those were election years, so that's probably a little different. But
it had a lot to do with it. But I think if you look at the demographics of Florida versus New Orleans, a lot of Florida is above ground. I mean, they're above sea level. New Orleans sits below sea level.
Right.
So the water may come in Florida, but it won't stay. But in New Orleans, once the water comes in, there's no way to get it out.
And the levees actually help keep it in.
Keeps it in.
Yeah.
So you actually, in some areas, you had to break the levee to get the water out. I know I came back in October, and there was an area near my mother. It's around an area around Jazzland in Michoud, and you can ride up to the top of the levee, and the water was still in 3 months later.
Wow.
And that water didn't clear out till probably another 2 months. And this was basically 5 months after the storm. So, I mean, there were a lot of things. I think a lot of things were learned by both the federal government as well as the people. I still say we'll have a problem if we had a major hurricane, because we're still strapped with the thought that not everybody can get out. You know, there's some people that rely on public transportation. You can't catch a bus outside of the city. I mean, you can go so far, but you're still within range of the storm. So, I mean, there's some major issues and still some major concerns. And I'm hoping that the federal government has some plans, because I'm praying, everybody says this was a 40-year storm because the last one we had in New Orleans, I think, was Betsy that would compare. But then it really doesn't compare because that only affected part of the city.
Right.
Katrina actually affected the whole city and all the surrounding areas.
The whole region.
So it's no comparing.
Yeah.
But I just hope there was some lessons learned, and I hope there is a better plan if something like this was to happen in the future.
Last question I did want to ask you on this. You brought up, people thought that that they would get insurance or federal government, the money would come in. When everything you own is washed away. I know a lot of people think, well, I'll be able to get insurance money or whatever. How were those things replaced? Were they replaced? How did families?
You have to realize you have the insurance money.
Did the insurance companies pay up? Because I know in a number of areas, they tried to get out of it.
Well, I didn't have that problem. I mean, my insurance company paid up. But when I received the money, basically what I did was paid off a mortgage for a home that I couldn't even use at that time. And some people did that, some didn't. Some decided to try to rebuild their lives in another way. But then you're still strapped with the mortgage that you signed on to however many years ago.
Right.
So you were basically in a catch-22. Should I take care of my debt? Because if I don't, I still have the same problem. I mean, it was just, I guess it's based on everybody's individual needs and their resources.
Right.
I mean, like I said, thank God I had the resources to really pull me through. And I had family that could do the same. But a lot of families still to date are still recovering. There was the FEMA trailer idea. We had a lot of people, pretty much the whole city was living in FEMA trailers. And that was like in a deserted area, no lights. I had 3 daughters. I worked for UPS, so I'm gone sometimes 12 hours a day. I couldn't see my family living in a trailer, no lights.
And Chinese drywall making everybody sick?
Well, that hadn't started. We hadn't started the rebuilding process just yet. But there was just so much crime. You had people looting still. And who would want to subject their kids and their families to that? So
yeah, I hear you.
It was rough. It was a difficult time.
Let me bring this back to the convention here in Philadelphia. What brings you up here? What's the hope of anything you get out of this convention?
Well, there's a lot of information that comes through this convention, and I wish that every Teamster could attend at some point in time. I come here religiously. Actually, I've never missed one since the first, and every year I take something away that I can share with somebody. I happen to have a few guys that are coming for the first time this year, and they're really surprised because you're not just looking at areas, you're looking at Teamsters across the country.
And in Canada. I talked to a couple of guys from Canada.
You got them. Wherever you go, there's a Teamster, and everybody has a different story. Everybody has a different fight. In New Orleans and Louisiana, we're a right-to-work state. So in order to get things done, it's a little more of a struggle versus closed shop states where if you're going to work the job, you have to be a part of the union. And I think our struggles are a lot different because our battles, we have people we work side by side with that don't feel the union does anything for them. But, I mean, it's rough, man. It's a constant battle. I'm a business agent. I represent the UPS employees in my area. And sometimes I get questions like, well, what do you do for me? I mean, if they can't figure out what we're doing for them, I think they need to look at themselves, because if you think companies are just going to walk in and give you 3 and 5% raises every year just because it's the right thing to do, then you're fooling yourself. It's the Teamsters and other locals such as, I mean, you name it, iron workers, you name it. I mean, we go in there and we actually have to fight. Nobody's giving us anything.
No.
And I think people are, if we start to lose the unions, then they'll realize the value of the union, and that would be sad. If we wake up and understand what the union is really about and what our plight is, I think this thing can grow into something big.
Well,
but
Stephen,
it's all on the people.
I'm right there with you, Stephen. I appreciate you sitting down with us, talking to us, and sharing your experience. I hope you enjoy the rest of your convention, and I appreciate it, man.
No problem, man. Thank you.
Let's take a quick break right back after this. Stick around. You're listening to The Rick Smith Show. We're working people. Come to talk.
Riders on the storm. Into this house we're born. Into this world we're thrown. Like a dog without a bone, an actor out alone.
Family values are more than slogans. The Rick Smith Show.
The world in two. I'm your host, Luke Vargas, reporting for Talk Radio News Service at the United Nations. 1 week ago, the U.S. entered the global spotlight after an unarmed black man was killed by police in the town of Ferguson, Missouri, prompting protests and a massive response by heavily armed cops. Talk Radio News Service correspondent Justin Duckham is on the ground in Ferguson.
Last night, the community underwent yet another night of looting. Today, we're seeing a much more organized scene. You see a lot of outside groups gathering here now. One of the folks who runs the local electronics shop said that probably about a dozen people there who brought brooms and plastic bags to help clean up the mess.
Civic order may be returning to Ferguson, but images from last week presented a startling picture of the U.S. to a global audience, in which a decade-long push to respond to national security threats has left local police forces looking an awful lot like militaries.
That's been questioned as creating incentives for local and state police to use that equipment even if it's not necessary. And that's really problematic under international human rights standards.
Maria McFarland Sanchez Moreno is the Deputy U.S. Program Director for Human Rights Watch.
Police forces are only supposed to use force when it's absolutely necessary and only to the degree necessary to control unlawful protests. But it's not something you should just resort to as a matter of course, which seems to be what's happening here.
Sanchez Moreno says the strong-armed approach to fighting drugs and crime is backfiring.
You know, you fill these prisons with low-level offenders. You give police departments a lot of big toys to play with, and you end up with what looks like more lawlessness instead of actually addressing real problems.
For more global news headlines, visit talkradionews.com.
Tales of American Political History with Clinton Porter Hackney.
In 1971, an immigrant couple came to New York City, each with a visitor's visa. However, the husband had a problem. He had a criminal record in his homeland of the United Kingdom, though it was a pretty short rap sheet. In his earlier years, London police had found cannabis in his apartment, and he had pleaded guilty to possession. In the spring of the following year, the couple was told by authorities that they could no longer stay in the United States because the feds were required to deport all immigrants previously convicted of a crime. So the couple hired a New York immigration lawyer, and they ended up with a good one. Leon Wiles was a well-respected attorney in the field of immigration law. He was active in the American Bar Association and nationally known. But this would be a tough one. Join us again for Wiles' interesting case. This is Clinton Porter Hackney at cphackney.com.
Chances are, when you took a shower this morning, an AFSCME member made sure that water was clean. When you drove to work, an AFSCME member maintained the road. When you rode an elevator, an AFSCME member inspected it. I'm David Philman, Executive Director of AFSCME Council 13, the American Federation of State, County, and Municipal Employees. AFSCME members enforce regulations, keep prisoners behind bars, take care of patients, protect the environment, and more. The work isn't glamorous, the salaries aren't high, but AFSCME members serve the public in every aspect of our daily lives. Chances are, you'll never see that AFSCME member working in a sewage plant, diving underwater to repair a bridge, or answering a 911 call. But aren't you glad they do? For more information, visit AFSCME13.org. We are AFSCME.
Pay all the judges and politicians they own. Their greed and corruption are very well known. On a consumer code of silence is what they depend. We know it, so let's don't pretend. You and me know it, so let's don't pretend.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Check out the website, thericksmithshow.com. A little bit later, we're going to have Justin Duckham, Talk Radio News Service, on the program live from Ferguson to give us an update of what's going on the ground, especially in light of a number of developments. The National Guard coming out, the report of 6 shots. The young man was shot 6 times, and the president now saying that Eric Holder will be heading out to Ferguson. Just kind of makes you wonder. But interesting. Another one of the Gallup surveys basically telling us what we already know, that we don't like Congress, but our guy's okay. According to the survey, 19% of voters say most members of Congress deserve to be reelected, while their own guy, half. We love him. 50% say we love our own guy. It's everyone else that sucks. Interestingly enough, though, we're now hitting a fairly low point, and even that, while we are at right about the lowest point in history overall on Congress, we're hitting that low point of our guy. Used to be in the high 50s. Our guy was good. Our guy was great. We like our guy. It's the rest of them that suck. But 50% now, almost the right down there at the second lowest point since these surveys have been being taken. And what's interesting to me is, Congress overall has this 13% approval rating, which, I'm thinking, cockroaches poll higher. And a lot of it has to do with, I think, you look at this, it's this divisiveness. Even with this shooting, I'm trying to, say, okay, how do we make sure this doesn't happen again? Right now, we've got people out there fanning the flames, and, the right wing is just, we should be militarizing. Where's the NRA? Did I miss the NRA? Where's it? They should be out there saying all of these protesters, all of these people in the streets who are being militarized against, all these people should have guns. That's what I would expect the NRA to say. Do you remember the Cliven Bundy thing? I mean, that's the weird thing for me in all of this. Just very, very, very strange. Anyway, we're going to take a quick break so we can get back with Justin. Stick around. You're listening to The Rick Smith Show.
We want the world and we want it now. We're going to take it anyhow. We want the airwaves.
Not right wing, just right. The Rick Smith Show.
Another day of sudden flood emergencies and high water rescues, this time in Long Island, New York.
Historic storms and flooding paralyze cities across the U.S. California breaks heat records again. China breaks solar investment records. Plus,
there's some nutcases in our country that don't believe in global warming.
President Jimmy Carter criticizes climate-denying Republicans.
All of those nutcases and more straight ahead. From BradBlog.com, I'm Brad Friedman.
And I'm Desi Doyen.
Stand by for 6 minutes of independent green news, politics, analysis, and snarky comment.
This episode uses strong, potentially offensive language to refer to climate deniers, but it's probably still not strong or offensive enough.
Ooh, Jay of the Best of the Left podcast getting into our snarky comment game. Well snarked, Jay. This is your Green News Report. Okay, Desi Doyen, we talked about it in our report earlier this week, but the rains had not finished yet in Detroit and had not even gotten to Long Island by that time.
Oh, yeah, the extreme weather hits just keep on coming. Historic deluges and dangerous flash floods breaking records across the eastern half of the U.S. this week, demonstrating the multiple, serious, and expensive impacts of global warming that are increasingly overwhelming our aging infrastructure. In Detroit,
the ground came up, and I just remember screaming at him, saying that we gotta go. It's not safe.
A record deluge caused historic flooding in the Motor City on Monday that turned highways into rivers, killing 2 people, and also backed up the city's sewage system into the streets. Days later, divers are still searching for victims in completely submerged cars. In Nebraska, a hospital security camera caught the power and speed of a massive flash flood that burst through the doors of the hospital with the speed and force of a tsunami. Several cities from Arizona to Massachusetts saw record flooding, but none so much as the Long Island town of Islip in New York State, which recorded 13 inches of rain in just 3 hours, unprecedented in state history.
When was the last time you've seen it this bad?
I actually worked during Hurricane Sandy, and it's been that kind of day.
Islip broke the New York State record for heaviest rainfall in a one-day period that was set during Hurricane Irene. But this was not a hurricane.
No, this was just Wednesday.
Right. Now, why is this happening all at once?
Why is this happening all at once?
Funny you should ask. NBC News reports it's changes in the jet stream.
According to a recent study, extreme weather is due to a rise in blocking patterns. That's when hot or wet weather stays stuck over a region for an extended period of time.
Most scientists are not surprised. They've actually seen this coming for a while. We've seen these type of blocking weather patterns almost double in the last decade.
We've seen it coming for a while. We've talked about it on this show for a while. Scientists have been warning about it for a very long time, all during which the denialists out there have just been ignoring it as if there's nothing to see here, no concerns.
Right, and of course good for NBC for mentioning that increase in blocking patterns, making extreme weather events more common.
So a blocking pattern is basically what?
Melting sea ice in the Arctic is changing the atmospheric air temperature. That's changing the jet stream, slowing it down, and that's what causes these blocking patterns.
So the systems stall, they can't move across the country as they normally would. Instead, they get blocked in place and just drop all of this water in one place?
Yep, but what NBC didn't tell you was the rest of the story. That new study also concluded that human-caused global warming is driving that increase in blocking patterns and extreme weather events. It's the opposite effect in California, where extended record drought is sending shock waves through the global food market, raising food prices. And not helping, California is also crushing heat records. The first 7 months of this year were the hottest ever recorded in the Golden State, meaning that 2014 is likely to beat 2013 as California's hottest year on record.
So the fact that I have been whining about how warm it is out here in California over the past 7 or 8 months is not my imagination.
That's right. Now, the solution to this, says former President Jimmy Carter,
is denying it?
No, it's to cut emissions.
We need something like a carbon tax, which I think is the only reasonable approach.
In an appearance at a renewable energy conference in Aspen, Colorado, the 89-year-old conservationist who established the Department of Energy and warned of the need to act on global warming while in office way back in the 1970s, he laid the blame for inaction squarely on Republican climate deniers.
I would say the biggest handicap we have right now is some nutcases in our country that don't believe in global warming.
But finally, some good news in China. They're already taking action. The city of Beijing just announced it is banning coal in its districts by 2020, and a new report shows China has installed more solar power in just the last 6 months than the U.S. currently has in existence.
Impossible. Fox News has told me over and over again that we can do whatever we want about global warming, but China doesn't care, and they're going to keep emitting. I guess Fox News was wrong again.
Yep.
Go figure. For much more on those stories and the ones we couldn't get to, please check out our website at greennews.bradblog.com. While you're there, please consider a donation to help the Green News Report stay on your public airwaves. From bradblog.com, I'm Brad Friedman.
And I'm Desi Doyen.
And this has been your Green News Report.
Most important issues of the day. This is the Rick Smith Show.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Check out the website, thericksmithshow.com. Questions, comments, something on your mind. You can email me, Rick, at thericksmithshow.com. Having a little trouble with Justin. He seems to be all tied up at the moment. This is what happens when you're live on the ground. And I'm interested to find out, since the news, since the report that the president's going to send Eric Holder out, what's that going to mean? Because I'm wondering what's going to happen with the report today that's been put out. What's the sense on the ground? We've been seeing an awful lot of stuff coming out. and I'm interested to find out what folks there on the ground are talking about, what the sentiment seems to be like. You know, having been, you know, in these kind of mass, you know, it takes me back to Wisconsin. You had 100 and some thousand people in the streets, and I don't remember the kind of police tactics that we're seeing in Ferguson. I just don't. So it'll be interesting to see where this takes us. Let's go to the phones. Let's see. Justin, you on the line?
Hey, yeah, sorry about that. It's been kind of a busy day.
Yeah, no, I can only imagine what's going on there in Ferguson right now. What's the sentiment at this moment?
You know what? I'm actually at the White House right now. I left Ferguson on Sunday morning, but the sentiment on the ground was absolutely outraged. You know, it went from sort of a sense of celebration. You know, when I initially arrived, there were people sort of marching up and down the street, you know, driving and honking their horns, hanging out of car windows, almost dancing in the street to a certain extent. And then, you know, that evening following the word of mouth news that the police had released security footage showing Michael Brown, you know, allegedly shoplifting via strong arm tactics, that sort of killed the, you know, goodwill that had been gained from the previous day, and led to sort of a return of violence.
And I wonder what tonight's going to lead, given the reports that was released today that he was shot 6 times.
You know, that's a very good point, and I have a feeling that it's not going to be getting much better for you know, any certain period of time. It looks like the National Guard is sort of moving in there. Obama today said that he had spoken with Governor Nixon, and it's going to be sort of an advisory role. He said that he is hoping that they are going to be acting, and I quote, in a limited and appropriate way. But we know that the escalation so far has not spelled any, you know, good news for the people of Ferguson.
Right. Now, the president said that the vast majority of people are peacefully protesting, but there are some that are not, and they're not going to stand for that. What does that mean?
It's essentially him just kind of doing what he has to do in this sense. He has to condemn the looters. He has to call for calm. You know, this is sort of his duty as the consoler-in-chief, and the fact that we haven't had an on-camera statement from the president about this until right now is frankly a little bit frustrating. But that's just my take. So he is essentially saying that you know, tension needs to go down there, and it wasn't just the you know, protesters who he had issues with. He also did acknowledge that there has been a certain level of police overreach, and you know, in the broader sense of things, in the longer takeaway, he said that he believes there's going to be a review of the militarization of local police departments in the wake of all of this.
Well, it's about time. You know, I've been calling for something like that for years, because all of those toys that we developed for Iraq had to come somewhere.
Absolutely, and you know, that's going to be one of the large takeaways to see how that happens. You know, there is a lot of scary equipment over there, and it doesn't necessarily look like it's helping very much. You know, it's not doing anything to quell the violence. You know, tear gas and the launchers and the you know, heavy artillery that they're using just doesn't seem to be deterring anything.
Now, you were there. What do you say to I had a number of people say that the police should just pull out. They should just pull back and allow the protesters basically to do whatever it is they're going to do, and for the community to police itself. I'm curious, in looking at this scenario when you were there, is that something that's even remotely possible?
I think it is, actually. You know, we know that on Friday night, you know, when I had first gotten there, when there was the riots that erupted, there were a lot of people who ended up kind of taking the role of the police and going up to the storefronts and blocking people from getting inside. And, you know, frankly, that's something that the police were unwilling to do. They were essentially cracking down on the demonstrators themselves when they were letting stores essentially just kind of get looted off to the sides. And it's a little bit frustrating to have seen that happen. You know, this is a 0.3 mile strip from, you know, Ferguson Avenue to the end of West Florissant, where all of this stuff is taking place. And considering the vast amount of manpower that the police have down there, it would have made sense to at least perch a couple in front of, you know, each individual strip mall to try to keep, you know, a lid on things. But that just did not seem to materialize. Beyond that, we know that there are people who are showing up early in the morning to try to clean up after each night's, outburst. And we also have, organizations like the New Black Panther Party who, most people would kind of predict to be sort of instigators in this issue, trying to take on a very responsible role. They were, when I was out there, holding training sessions for how to, direct traffic if the police aren't there. They had one member who was going around from one end of the block to the other, warning people about the curfew, letting them know that ultimately, they could not guarantee their safety, and just warning those who need to get out of the area to make sure that they get out at exactly 12 o'clock. So there's certainly an effort to try to carry on, self-policing, and typically it looks like once the tear gas gets involved, that's when things really take off. But at the same time, there's some dangerous situations that are going on the ground as well, and I think a complete absence of police wouldn't be the solution, but I think maybe a hybrid of the two would probably be the best, just from my limited, tactical understanding of how this stuff works.
Now, to me, the strong arm stuff never seems to work. It gets people who may otherwise be peaceful, may get them prone to taking it out on somebody. Absolutely.
I don't think I've told you about this yet, but I ended up getting tear gas when I was down there on Saturday evening. There was probably about 40 protesters who decided to defy the curfew. So they ended up launching in a couple canisters of tear gas. Later, they told us that there were individuals inside a nearby barbecue restaurant that were apparently armed and had perched out on the roof. And the fact that instead of taking care of it like a general police action, they decided to try to clear out the crowd first and then move in. Using tear gas was, frankly, pretty frustrating. And it's also worth noting that night, when they were trying to say that they weren't trying to break up the curfew defiers and that they were simply acting out of safety, they ended up not apprehending any of the supposed gunmen, and instead arrested 7 people for merely protesting and, as Captain Ron Johnson put it, failing to disperse.
Interesting. And you said someone was perched at the barbecue restaurant. Why tear gas here and not in the Clive and Bundy situation? I mean, because that's a conversation I had over the weekend. Why is that this is met with overwhelming force, with massive accumulation of troops, if you will, with flash grenades and tear gas, yet where you actually really truly had a situation that could have erupted into almost a civil war kind of thing, we just kind of walked away.
I don't want to give the people at the Bundy Ranch that much credit to suggest that they were anywhere near in numbers of what we're seeing in Ferguson. Also, there are people who I pretty much feel like are all bark and no bite because, for all of the sort of whining they do, they are not people who have actually had much hardship in their lives, it seems like.
No, you're right. I don't want to give that impression that they're anything like each other, but you see these accumulations of people, and one group of people are met with flash grenades and tear gas. The other group of folks, we just kind of left alone.
That's certainly how it is. It's frustrating to say the least, but that's how they've chosen to go about this. I can't necessarily say why they didn't do that stuff in the Bundy Ranch, but I feel like the anger that's being expressed by protesters is very real. I feel like a lot of this is coming out of a sense of desperation because these people in a lot of situations don't really have much else to lose.
Right.
You're young and poor and black in America. Arrest isn't necessarily that big of a threat, and this is essentially, a way to voice your anger, and there doesn't really necessarily seem to be many negative consequences for it. So, it seems like a perfect situation to turn violent. So
the president is sending Eric Holder to Ferguson. What's the point? Why is he doing that now?
He's going to be meeting with FBI officials on the ground. I think he's probably also going to be monitoring the security situation over there. But this is essentially, the effort from the administration to ensure that there is going to be an independent administration, FBI level investigation of this shooting from the Civil Rights Division. And I think having Holder being sent in on the ground is going to help drive that message home.
Anyone you still have contact with that may have some insight in it? Because one of the things I was thinking is, what's the sentiment now that this report on how many times this guy was shot? What's the sentiment there? Any feeling?
From what I heard, still outraged last night after the number of bullets was released. We saw one of the one of the most fragile nights we've seen over there. I had some friends over there who I made on the press side of things who were talking about how this was probably the worst night they had seen yet, how they were targeted themselves by the police, how they were told that if they left certain areas they were going to be maced, how they were trapped in their cars while being surrounded by tear gas, and it looks like this is a situation that's a long way off from being solved.
When you were there, did you fear for your life at any point? I mean, because I've been in these situations where who knows what's going to happen. But as a journalist, did you have that very real fear that you could be next?
I did. During the night of a curfew, when the tear gas went off, I ended up, kind of covering my mouth with the trash bag and running behind the building to try to, recover and just kind of get my surroundings and stuff. Following that, I ended up trying to go back onto the street, and when that happened, we heard gunshots, and there was a police car coming by shooting what I had presumed to be, leather bullets or, beanbags or whatnot. And in that situation, I kind of realized I was a sitting duck in the middle of an empty lot. I was wearing my credentials, but this was from sort of a distance. And in that moment, I had to, hightail it out of there. So I felt threatened, by the police more so than the demonstrators themselves, who actually were begging us in the media to, stay with them to defy the curfew. And, a lot of them were telling us, like, you're the only thing right now that's not getting us killed. So,
do you ever think you'd see something like that in our country?
No. I mean, this wasn't my first time, being around unrest. I'd been around a lot of dicey situations back in 2003 when I was a teenager, and was kind of a radical and stuff, and protesting the Iraq War. But something on this level, for this duration, is just absolutely shocking, and I think it speaks volumes about just kind of the frustration that's been mounting in this country for a while, and it seems kind of obvious now that this was something that's bound to happen.
Yeah, Justin, I appreciate you talking to us and telling us what you saw there. I appreciate it.
Hey, thank you so much, Rick.
Thanks so much, Justin Duckham, Talk Radio News Service. Quick break, right back. Stick around. You're listening to The Rick Smith Show.
Radio of, for, and by we the working people. The Rick Smith Show.
The story exploding out of Ferguson, Missouri is doubly infuriating. First, there is the obvious outrage of yet another unarmed black teenager, Michael Brown, being stopped by one of the town's white police officers as he was walking to his grandmother's house. The scuffle ensued, and Brown was shot to death by the officer. He was then left lying in the street for hours, during which time the police didn't even bother to notify his family. Understandably, furious citizens have erupted in protest. Outrage number two is that Ferguson's police, practically all of whom are white in a town that's two-thirds black, did not respond to the public outcry like police officers, but like an occupying army. What was needed was a calm, professional, and empathetic response. Instead, the police confronted Ferguson with full military force, rolling out in armored Bearcat vehicles, hovering helicopters, riot gear, camouflage outfits, and body armor. They approached the unarmed citizens with assault rifles, grenades, tear gas, nightsticks, and a macho attitude. It was a tactical commando assault on civilians, the vast majority of whom were doing what they should be doing, calling autocrats to account. But wait, Where did this tiny town's police force, supposedly made up of peace officers, get such weaponry and a military attitude? From the Pentagon, which has quietly been militarizing America's police departments for the last 2 decades, sending billions of dollars worth of Bearcats, helicopters, machine guns, etc. to any Mayberry police chief with Rambo fantasies. This is Jim Hightower saying, your town and mine are being militarized too. We must halt this perversion of proper policing, or we'll be the next Ferguson. For starters, tell your governor, don't militarize my block. You can do it by going to www.change.org/petitions.
Hightower's commentaries are brought to you by the Hightower Lowdown, the monthly newsletter with Hightower's take on what Wall Street and Washington are up to. For information, visit hightowerlowdown.org.
Would you dive 14 feet deep in the Susquehanna to keep a bridge safe? Would you spend night after night with prisoners to keep your community safe? Would you spend Christmas Eve plowing snow to keep roads safe? AFSCME members do. Men and women who choose to serve in public service. Mine inspectors, 911 dispatchers, healthcare workers, parole agents. You may not think about them, but no, they're all thinking about you. This message brought to you by AFSCME Council 13.
The proud defender of the American dream, Rick Smith.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Check out the website, thericksmithshow.com. More good news from our Republican friends. Yes. In Iowa, a state representative, a Republican state representative from Iowa, evidently was, this is just one of those things you go, really? Arrested last week on third-degree sexual abuse charges. Evidently, his wife is mentally incapacitated. She, according to the courts, does not have the legal capacity, does not have the function to be able to say whether or not she's interested in any type of sexual contact. And the guy was told, don't do it. I said, look, your wife's incapacitated, unable to say one way or another whether she would be interested or not. The court told him no. But Henry Rayhans, the Republican representative, evidently did it anyway. They have a video of him leaving her room with underwear that he threw away, and the roommate saying, yeah, I heard it all. The criminal complaint dated May 15th, 2004, said, hey, no more. Well, about a month later, he did it again. And that's where the arrest last week. Now, what's interesting to me is, as I'm reading through this story, evidently in Iowa, and I would have to imagine in many states across the country, it was legal for a man to have sex with his wife against her will. That's what I used to call rape, but evidently not up until about 25 years ago. And even in states that have these spousal rape laws in place, convicting anyone, not overly often, especially when you have a situation where the victim can't speak. So it takes me back, and you go, does this happen often? Now this woman has since passed, and now they're saying, well, he was arrested, which I guess is good, but who's going to testify against them? I guess the other part of this is the guy the court did say don't do it, and he went and did it anyway. I guess I'm kind of thinking what the defense is. It's just odd. Also, last week on Friday, the 6th U.S. Circuit Court of Appeals ruled on a lawsuit against Hamilton County, Ohio's coroner's office and the morgue director for failing to stop one of their employees from having sex with up to 100 of the corpses. They ruled that it can continue on. A number of years back, this guy was arrested, and he got caught the old-fashioned way. The police were looking into DNA, someone had murdered this young woman, and they did a DNA test, found semen, and it wasn't the guy who did the crime. Turns out it was the guy who worked in the coroner's office. He's now in jail, but now you've got folks who are suing, and I think rightly so. At some point, you got to hold somebody accountable. Are now suing Hamilton County for the. How horrible is that? I mean, that's just completely outrageous. And you just think about how screwed up society has become. I mean, has it always been this way? You know, while we were playing some of the last of the Teamster interviews that we did last week, you know, I got in a couple of email conversations with folks, you know, about, you know, is it now that we're just now seeing this stuff? Is it now that it's just coming to our attention, or is it just now we're paying attention? And, you know, for me, it's all of this stuff has been going on. There's really not a lot you can do about it now. But the question then becomes, you know, once you look at this stuff, it comes down to, I think now within the age of social media, because I didn't hear about the shooting on TV. I didn't hear about it in the news. I heard about it through Twitter. I heard about it on Facebook. I heard about it through social media. I didn't hear about it on the corporate-controlled mainstream media. So it's one of those things that makes you go, we've got a lot of work to do in this country, especially, you know, on the front of race relations. And, you know, last week while we were at the Teamsters conference, the Teamsters Black National Caucus Convention, I had the opportunity to talk to a lot of black guys who were saying, you know what, we get this kind of stuff all the time. We get the police pulling us out of our cars when we're going out on dates. We get the police coming after us, doing this and that. I guess it's stuff we have to deal with. Anyway, if you missed any portion of the program, thericksmithshow.com. That's where you go to get the podcast. The Rick Smith Show app on the smartphone. Take the program on the go wherever you go. If you've got any questions, comments, you want to weigh in on this, you can email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. Great talking to you with you. Thanks for being here. We'll see you back here tomorrow.
You've been listening to The Rick Smith Show. Together, we can make America better. Email rick@thericksmithshow.com or interact with us anytime at thericksmithshow.com. Until next time, this has been The Rick Smith Show, where working people come to talk.
It's coming like the tide flood beneath the lunar sway. Imperial, mysterious, and amorous array. Democracy is coming to the USA.
We see the storm out on the horizon. The clouds grow dark in the midnight sky. We feel the fire burning in the belly. The flame leaps out with an angry cry. From the underground where the night